still haunt me to this day. But you did, yes you did. You didn't have to say my name, ignite my circuits, start a flame. But you did. Oh, the turpentine erased me whole. Who don't want to live my life alone? Who was waiting for you all my life? Set me free, my honeybee. Smile at me. Your grin's the sweetest that I've ever seen. But you did, yes you did. You didn't have to offer your hand, 'cause since I've kissed it I am at your command. But you did. Oh, a turpentine erased me whole. Who don't want to live my life alone? I was waiting for you all my life. Set me free, my honeybee. Hello, goodbye, it was nice to know you. How I find myself without you, that I'll never know.
That I'll never know.
I let myself go.
I let myself go.
Hello, goodbye, I'm rather crazy, and I never thought I was crazy. But what do I know?
What do I know?
I let myself go.
I let myself go.
Ooh, honeybee. Hello, goodbye, it was nice to know you. How I find myself without you, that I'll never know. I let myself go. Hello, goodbye, I'm rather crazy, and I never thought I was crazy. But what do I know?
What do I know?
I let myself go.
I let myself go.
Hello, goodbye, it was nice to know you. How I find myself without you. Hello, goodbye, I'm rather crazy, and I never thought I was crazy. Hello, goodbye, it was nice to know you. How I find myself without you. Hello, goodbye, I'm rather crazy, and I never thought I was crazy.
It was in this exact moment that I was invaded by a very tiny boy. I'm going to have to put him back in bed. So please enjoy the supplemental Nosferatu. And I'll be back in just a second. Thank you for your patience. Hi, ADHD is a hell of a drug, and it runs in the family. Which means that when my eldest figures out he's got something on his foot, a scab or something, he can't ignore it, because that's how it works. Hi, everybody, it's me, it's Thades. We forgot the little earbud times here. We can do Trees for Kitties. Hi, Ties Share. Ties Share, I'm so glad you're excited. That makes me really glad. I've put a lot of work into this, though I haven't actually written anything in a chapter that's been concrete. I've written a little bit. Most of it's still outlining stuff and like mapping out. I have the whole story mapped, but it's the bridge parts between the major events that I have to still work out in my head, and I haven't written those out. But I've been trying to figure out ways to motivate myself to write the next couple of chapters that I know how they have to go pretty precisely. I'm missing a cat. It fled when Thades Prime ran in here. Should be back. The bell. Zia, thanks for that lurk, friendo. And thanks for that lurk, Derpy. So what are we going to do tonight? So I'm going to read you this, read you what I got of this book. Not the whole thing. It's like seven chapters. The seventh one's pretty rough, and then I've got, I think, like a little bit of number 8 that I don't like, and like a chapter 7 or 6.5 that I don't know how to get into the story, and I might have to ditch it. But it involves a pretty critical character, and I don't know how to introduce in this particular story at the velocity I need that character to be introduced. Now, if you've ever hung out here, I guess it's actually been long enough that the folks who were around all the time when I talked about my D&D campaign at length, they are not on Twitch anymore or stream themselves or are at a dance convention this weekend. So none of you all are going to be, none of you are pre-spoiled, we'll say. No worries about you knowing what's happening. So I have you all to thank for being fresh ears and eyes on what the story is going to be. So also, it's okay if you want to be very quiet for this stream, if you're going to be lurking, either because you're listening or just providing presence. I appreciate any and all of that. I'm going to record this with my new microphone setup, which I actually, some of you may have actually listened to these, possibly highlight reels of most of this work, and there hasn't been that much changed in that content since the last time I did the reading. Like, that's content that's already been exposed to the internet, except for the mic quality. I did convert my D&D. Well, yeah, basically. So the D&D campaign setting has a lot of work behind it. Tide Strider. I sure am beardless. I am the audiobook this evening. How are you doing, friendo? The entire D&D world I've built has a very long and detailed history. We're talking thousands of years that are basically understood by me in terms of geological transformations, the cultures, the civilizations that rose and fell, and why, and also the reasons others think they fell and why they think those reasons, and myth, and those three things are different, but all related, right? And I also have, I understand the climate, mostly how trade works across all of the kingdoms at play, and how the very different government systems in each of those places work. Just some examples, there is a kingdom, one of the oldest kingdoms that's still functional. It actually has roots in the ancient world. Its people were there, but they don't remember a lot of it because it's been so long. But they've had the same king, human king, for 1,000 years because he's dead and a ghost. And he's really more of an advisor because he's been around so long, and he's a little not. He doesn't it's hard to communicate with him because it's just been around so long. And I made this character up years ago, and I have yet to have a single D&D character in any of I've run the campaign, I will say 3 times, really. 2 groups have made it really far. One made it to the end, and another group is on their way there. I mean, they got a long way to go, but they're doing very well, and they've covered a lot of ground that the previous 2 groups didn't cover, and I ran a 3rd group that didn't end up finishing it. All had very different approaches to the problems I presented them. So, yeah. Yeah, I got a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff's all hammered out. You totally can. That's from flattered. Thank you. This is very D&D. So basically, I've made up some characters that I'm running through this game. Essentially, my campaign world. And the campaign world also has a general goal. And I guess I'm not going to tell you what the goal is, so I don't spoil the story for you. And of course, like I'm been changing. Like if you're a D&D player and you've played a lot of it. I mean, it's a lot of this campaign is rooted in third edition because that's where I did most of the groundwork for it and the character design and the themes and stuff. And so even though I run the game in fifth edition now, you can kind of tell there's some third influences there if you actually mechanically speaking and the way the characters act as well. And sort of like the way the theology all works. You might still sense a little bit of that, not necessarily the third edition, but certainly the D&D. So, yeah. Well, I'm happy about that. I also want to put little references to like the player characters from my previous campaigns are in there. Like right now, there's only one concrete reference to one of my players from history. His character is not in the game, but it's just like basically a name drop. It's like an Easter egg, right? It's important to me that the characters that I am writing are my characters because for the most part, I was able to explore the themes I wanted to with players. But when I'm just DMing and the players are doing it, they are the main characters and they wind up defining themes that they want to explore in a world that I present to them. That's what Dungeons and Dragons is, right? At least for me. But there are themes that I want to explore. While they kind of touched on those sometimes, because the campaign will lead them to those questions. I want to explore them myself. And that's what writing is really for that. And also, there are a lot of really important NPCs that are major characters throughout the entire game who in this will be main characters. And so we'll get this. I'm excited to like breathe more life into these characters that I created and have been supporting actors for 15 years now. So, Ed Greenwood. ADHD times. That name sounds familiar to me. I do not remember this man. The Forgotten Realms stuff. Oh gosh, I did run a lot of Forgotten Realms way back in the day. I like exploring two major themes. Maybe it's easier. Like we can skip the spoilers if I talk about one of the major themes I explore, and I used Ravenloft to do it. I don't like the Ravenloft campaign setting. I don't like the way it was redone either. Like I like a lot. There's a lot to it that's awesome, but there's also a lot to it that's flippantly racist, blatantly sexist, trashy, and myopic. And I just it needed a lot of work. And so when my friends asked me, they directly asked me, said, "Could you run Ravenloft your way?" Because they were convinced that I would change it in ways that they would find palatable. And I did my best to do that. And so one of the major transformations I made to Ravenloft was I made all Ravenloft forever canonical. Like every campaign that's ever been played had happened because Ravenloft is a time loop, and a time loop exists to punish Strahd. When I ran the game, I had this sort of like thousands of iterations later where Strahd understands he's trapped and has to find a way out. And he does that so the campaign start was not, oh no, you walk through the mist and you're in Strahd's town and he's going to abuse you the whole time because he's an abusive monster. No. Everyone thinks Strahd's a monster. Strahd is tired, feels guilty and regret, and no one will ever believe he's good. And so he wants to stop the loop to get everyone untrapped. And so the campaign starts in his castle. Basically, the players wake up and they're just there. And, Strahd is terrifying, even if their characters don't actually know who a vampire is. But you get it. The players get it. And so that's the kickoff. But the theme there are the crimes of this man forgivable? And what would it mean to forgive him? And I don't pose an answer to that in Ravenloft. I let my players explore that question, right? And my players, a lot of them are, the LGBTQIA plus folks, right? And so they have very, very justified axes to grind with that exact demographic. And at the same time, I think a lot of folks, especially in my space, like want those kinds of men who have failed that badly to try and atone, even if they'll never be forgiven. That's one theme I really want to really dig into. And I don't know that any of my writing or works or campaigns will ever find an answer to it. I don't know. But that's one that really draws me to it. And so it comes up a lot in my campaigns. Essentially, evil is not like the anti-villain structure. I also really like that, where someone who like is desperate to do something they feel is good and they're doing bad things to get there because they just don't know any other way. And like, you know, are the players going to kill this person because doing that will stop the problem and save all the people who are going to die? But also the person has their own goal, which is also good. They're just fucked up. And how do they navigate that? Right. So I love that stuff. I love that stuff. Yeah, it's a big oof, Ty. That's a good way of summarizing it. Yes. Yeah. Oh, he's the Elminster creator. I got you. Yeah, so that's one theme. Another theme is essentially like, you know, what is evil? And I've talked about that on stream before, which is that I defined evil concretely for my campaign. I wanted evil to be a thing that the players could, because players they had like the paladins that could detect evil. And so I'm like, okay, how do I know what is and isn't evil at a whim, right? You know, and the idea I came up with is that, and degrees of evil, it is whether or not an individual enjoys inflicting harm, with a very general, broad definition of harm, enjoys inflicting harm without consent to do so. Malice, basically. That's evil in my campaigns and kind of in my real life. That's how I see it. So that's another theme that I like to explore in these stories. Is like, you know, what is the definition? Like, I mean, that's the definition of evil, but not everyone sees evil that way. A lot of people want to see evil as black and white. And in a campaign world where I basically present only a handful of villains that are actually unrepentant evil monsters that there's just no hope for, and I present them later after I've presented other villains who there is some justification for them going bad, even if the players have to destroy them, you know, because they feel like they have to destroy them because there's no other way to stop them and make things actually right or save people or prevent further harm from being done. They kind of get it. They're like, shit, could that happen to me? Could my character have also fallen into this dark trap and then felt like, well, I can see how someone would do these horrible things with everything that's happened to this bastard, and they were still wrong to do them. But like that kind of conflict really fascinates me. So. Big Betty, Most Pouring Sacrifice. Yeah, I mean, I do like Mulligan's stuff a lot about power structures and capitalism. I love his themes a lot. I wish I had the encyclopedic knowledge that man has about that stuff, because I'd like to explore that kind of stuff too. But I just don't know it as deeply as he does. So, yeah. Ooh. So that's the backdrop. That's the setup. Folks are all ready. I wonder if I should like do chapter splits here or something so that like people know. That's okay. So let's switch over to the screen. I have to do that on this thing. Let's go here and here, and then the book. This is the book as it is right now. We actually have 5 minutes before the pre-roll ads start. So maybe we'll just chill for another couple of minutes. I wonder if there's anything else about the D&D setup that would be good to know before we start. It starts in a tavern, but that'll be obvious within the first paragraph and a half. Because all D&D campaigns have to start in a tavern. That's like very important. Like Patrick Rothfuss started his book in a tavern too. In fact, his character is a tavern owner. Patrick Rothfuss, I think every writer in recent history has some issues with the way they present things and stuff. So, you know, hashtag that there's, you know, he's not perfect. But anyway, I do remember that setup of that book. A back of the book synopsis. So It might be. So basically, the idea is here's another theme that it's not unique that I'm exploring it. It's also not the most interesting part, but it is a thing. Passing the passing the buck in a lot of like basically every D&D campaign ever. All of them are predicated upon the same thing that Lord of the Rings was, which is there are previous civilizations had it together, were amazing, and they have fallen for whatever reasons, and they leave behind them in dungeons and crypts and ancient ruins really powerful weapons, your +2 swords, your boots of jumping, all that shit. I mean, yeah, now there are rule sets for making those own things. Players can make them. But the whole core idea was someone left them there because shit went wrong, right? Fallen civilizations. In my story here, the fallen civilizations have committed huge atrocities, and they've literally passed the burden of that to the future. They didn't want to deal with it, and they managed to essentially seal it away. And the players in all of the campaigns are lured into setting it free and having to deal with it. I guess I could tell you the campaigns. Well, no, I don't want to tell you the campaign setup. That's too much of a spoiler. But yeah, the idea is that these, that it's about ancient civilizations fucking it up and passing the buck. I guess if there was a back of the book synopsis, it would be that there are several characters who join up with so there's a settler caravan that is moving from a very well established country through a newly dug tunnel and pass through a mountain into a valley because this kingdom called Caden is trying to establish its own presence in the valley. It's a big long river, and the river is the trade river where the rest of the planet just like they trade everything there, and Caden is the end of the trade route because the way the map works is I have a map. Let me get the map while I'm talking about this. So the trade route. Where the fuck is it? Hang on. Please stand by. I have to go into my private account to get this. It's in my RPG tabletop. The Hollis campaign. There it is. This one right here. Nope, that's not it. It's got to be in the major one. And I have an updated map, right? I think that is... Here we go. Let's just yoink this. Ha! Here it is. This is a really old map. Hang on, do I have a new map? That's the old map. I redid it. And it's really important that we use the new one because the book is based on the new one. The old map essentially set the campaign up, and it worked okay for the first go at the campaign because they had the primary features of the land, like Caden and its neighbors in Nurian and Stalthus were isolated from the rest, but they were too isolated to be a reasonable, they wouldn't have survived as countries in the way I needed them to survive to make sense for the story. Perfect. This is a good time for me to take this minute and 30 seconds to find this fucking map while I run the ads and nothing interesting happens. Why do I run ads? Because if I don't, then pre-rolls get turned on. So I'm going to do that. And you all go ahead and fill your water glasses if you didn't have a chance yet. Stretch your legs out a little bit. Friend of the show, Fraggy, is live right now. So thanks, Derpy. Pop in there and tell her she's really fantastic, and you all appreciate that she is streaming now because what a delight that we have that here. And I'll be back in a minute and 30 seconds. And then see if this new automated feature I built works. If I click the button. Yes. Oh, timer automated and everything. Okay, nothing interesting is happening right now. Definitely finding this map is not interesting. Is it in the start folder? Yeah, there it is. Ah, found it. That's all it took. Nice. She's doing cult stuff. There you go. Let's go. Yeah, friends, if you're not familiar with Fraggy, she's really fantastic. I've known Fraggy for a very, very long time. It's also okay if you want to go hang out with Fraggy right now and then listen to the recording of this later. That's totally fine. I'm also happy to answer questions about the book and stuff if you like that kind of live experience with the quote author unquote. And we are there. I don't have background music because I just don't know what music would actually go with each of these scenes. I'd get too wrapped up in picking a perfect song. So this is the map. So here is Caden. This is the country I was just talking about. The story starts over here. Rizaldi's Rest is like essentially sitting next to this new path they cut through the mountain in order to build these two towns across this. This is essentially the Mississippi. It's literally a mile across. It's a big, big ass river. And there are ancient bridges that some other culture built long ago that go over the river that they can use to get over it. But, they previously you see they're right here in the ass of the trade route. So the river comes down, like all these nations trade with all these nations in this area right here. It's really hard. I'm going too fast with my mouse cursor. And then by ship would come around the peninsula and through Jern and Sign, and then through the bay here is how trade would work. And so like Caden's just getting the shaft in terms of stuff. Like they have some exports that are good for them, right? Cadic beer is very popular, but it's not a lot of trading power, and so they wanted to have a bigger seat at the table. And so by establishing essentially this frontier town, because this is all unclaimed land, at least so they thought, and so they put two settlements over here. And the story starts with a number of caravanners who are being recruited by a man who is fronting this effort. And so the man who's fronting it, his name is Bryant Noland, he's a very wealthy merchant who has been roped into doing this. And it's not clear. He doesn't tell anyone he's not doing this of his own free will. That comes up later. So they come over here, and how this is the center, because it is literally at the center of civilization and nothing has a foothold there yet. There are reasons nothing has a foothold there yet. A couple of reasons, and the poor Halicians run into all of it. And so in the campaign setup is this. Most Dungeons and Dragons games don't have a goal. There's no concrete thing. It's usually, let's go on adventures, let's build up your characters, let's make a story together. And that is also true here in my campaign, but there's one major goal. My goal as the Dungeon Master is to raise Hollis to the ground, to salt the earth, to scatter or destroy or kill all of its citizens, and render the land below unto glass. Okay? And it is the player's goal to stop me. That's the campaign setup. And obviously as a DM, I could just meteor it, but that's not the point. Like I set up, there's all these political struggles that start happening, and they end up unearthing some ancient evil because, of course, it's Dungeons and Dragons. But it's a ancient evil Thades style, so it's like hilariously not okay. And so I guess that's the back of the book synopsis. Maybe that's a better one than I gave you before. I have thought a lot about running D&D on the stream. It would probably be a hollow surrender. It would have been a couple years ago if I had run it. But my unreasonable needs for production quality for a long time made it difficult for me to grok how I would do it. Because I'm not going to be able to do it like a Matt Mercer thing, right? I mean, they have a lot of money, a lot of experience, and really talented fucking voice actors. There's a lot of pressure to put on any of my lovely co-streamers who'd be so fun to fucking play with, right? So I think I need to ease up on myself, and then I'll be able to play a game like that. I fucking love this map. I'm so happy I thought that map came out. Yeah, and so I also made an old graphic from a long time ago, which might be really useful here. Do I still have, let me see here. This is perfect. Okay, one last image just to show you. I made this image in SimCity 3. Was it SimCity 2000 or SimCity 3? I can't remember which SimCity I used to do this. It was one of the old ones. It might have been 2000. And to communicate to my players what the valley looked like. And so essentially, they come down from here. I also have a picture of this from the south. This is a very steep cliff on the way down. There's a really sharp road that goes down to the river. There's a bridge across that is not on this map. And then Hollis is basically on this flatland right here. And then the road, the trade road, goes this way. The trade river goes that way. So they are in a valley. Yes, that's a volcano. Yes, it's relevant. Oh, you don't have a dad? I guess I could do that. I could do the dad DMing. Well, I have been giving it thought. It's not going to happen. It probably won't happen this year, fam. But I think it's not out of the question that it won't happen next year. So anyway, that's really nice. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, I have to find like a consistent night and stuff and make sure I have bandwidth to like actually do the It's a lot of work, as you know, to like do campaign shit like that. So, okay. Do I have enough water? That depends on what this water state is right now. By that is fine. Okay. I mean, I have all the setting and stuff. I would just have to essentially a reset on Hollis. Would be the 5th or 6th time I've done it. But it's still like between missions. It takes a lot of work, and I'm in the middle of a Hollis campaign right now, and tracking 2 Hollis campaigns in parallel is too much. It's hard enough to track the book and a single campaign. So, okay. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll appreciate that, Ty Strider. Thank you. Okay, are we ready? Am I ready? I'm ready. Okay. Thank you for your patience. I have to watch the timer here to make sure that I mean, the stream will warn us. Okay. All right, here we go. Chapter 1. I have to read for my true voice, right? I don't want to show my side panel. Thoughts. Thoughts steal in, unannounced and unbidden. Center stage and mid-verse by the time we take notice. Thoughts guide us for good and for ill. They trick us, leading us to believe that we author them when really they author us. Wade sat alone at a table, 4 rough-chiseled wooden chairs, meditating over his empty mug. Thoughts came to him unasked, as they do for us all. Most of the inn's 36 patrons crowded around the bar, their voices and words becoming thoughts in one another and in him as well. Wishes for this year's harvest to yield more than the last. Praise for the house ale, or any ale. Mutterings of a stiff shoulder. Each utterance is a pebble cast into the water, rippling out over all who can hear it. The bard's tune was chipper and soft. The fireplace was warm on his left side, its fire and 100 candles lit the room. Voices not meant for my ear, my moment of self-awareness, each tiny light, each thing I notice is a thought. They're separate from me, but within me. Within, but apart. Each thought can lead to another, forming a chain that can bind one's focus. If Wade would allow it, his mind would become a sieve and trace a single chain of memories. The bard's song, he'd heard it once before, in his hometown out to the west. That inn was the Stray Briar. Its owner is Margit, friend to his father and a skilled storyteller. This inn here is called the Noisy Dragon. This town, Risaldi's Rest. Most of its citizens are farmers and lumberjacks, and its position on the river makes it a booming trade hub for the eastern edge of Caden. Each link on the chain has many more links to many more chains, forming an iron web of distraction and reflection. The mind is a tangled sea of these webs, emotions, images, and words, ones we're so accustomed to drowning in that few ever notice the lack of air. Wade had been taught how to observe and not follow these chains. He let his awareness dip into the waves only a moment before releasing those thoughts, rising above them, and watching them fade. As these thoughts passed, as all thoughts do, the murky waters of the mind began to settle and clear. Within, but... A fresh and full pint landed on his table with a thunk, shoving his empty aside. Spilling a touch at his handle was turned to him. 3 fat candles on his table flickered with the interloper's movements, their light center stage in the small puddle of beer. Lost in thought? Sorry, I have to try and do her accent. I'm not going to do good, but we got to do it. Lost in thought, she said, her voice and smirk thick with genuine Ursulian hospitality. Wade brushed his hair from his eyes and met hers, light blue and crisp, like a hazy mid-morning sky. Skin linen white and riddled with soft freckles. She was taller than Wade, stronger, broader in her shoulders, and she had calloused and sinewy hands, hooded by well-beaten steel vambraces. Her loud red hair struggled to free itself from the chignon she'd bound it in, 2 tresses resting on her spaulders. She was well-armed, armored, and still smirking with an old merchant's confidence, a proud merchant who'd just gained the upper hand in a deal. She's Ursulian for certain, he thought. Blue eyes, thought Wade. Very rare for her people. I saw you'll empty, she said. We can't have that this early in the evening. Her accent was potent, but not harsh, sonorous with briefly trilled R's. She dropped into the chair to his right, her chain hauberk jingling abruptly as if she'd dropped a coin purse onto the table. Her smirk eased into a smile as she unstrapped her shield from her shoulders and leaned it against the far side of her chair. It seems we no longer do, Wade said, pacing his words like a cut purse's footsteps. What did I do to win this small favor? An empty cup is enough, she said, waving her hand in curt dismissal. I'm Marsta of Thok Modan. Ursul for sure, then. Modan is a province in its southern reaches, very far to the north and east of here by way of the valley. What had brought her here to Caden, so many leagues away? She wore a sword and a mace, both belted to her left hip. Cloak, leathers, and mail were all worn by the road and combat, but well maintained. No embroidery, no frills, no engravings. Her one adornment was a small iron talisman hung from her neck with thick twine, a tiny but distinctive hammer within a ring, flat head to the left, spike to the right, the star of Harker, a deity of valor and honor. Worship of Harker is common in the north, but only the clergy tended to display it. She was beautiful, but took no pains to emphasize it. Her ensemble was plain and functional, and the way she carried herself spoke of a warrior who had seen more battles than all of the other patrons put together. You're a cleric, he asked. She gave him a firm, single nod. Like yourself, isn't it so? Not precisely. Marsta sized Wade up with her eyes and made no effort to be subtle about it. Ah, of course, she said. Gloomy colors, coat, shirt, and pants all brown and black. The silver collar pin of a cloaked woman holding a staff in both of her hands. An armlet on each arm, each 2 tarnished silver bands squeezing a thin sterling silver band. She who suffers no name does not require speakers, only listeners. She has some knowledge of my own faith, then, thought Wade. The lady does, in fact, suffer names of a kind. The Silver Lady, the Collector, our Keeper, Goddess of Endings. She who suffers no name is the most powerful of the pantheon. She is the goddess of death. I find I get more out of a conversation when I listen rather than speak, he said. That sounds a little bit like preaching to me, she needled, her smirk returning. Semantics only. You still choose not to share your name. Forgive me. I'm still a bit confused at my sudden company. You're very easy on my eyes, she laughed, looking like a 12-year-old vandal who just pinned the blame for a broken window on the town drunk. What? Martha continued. You don't like free beer? He hadn't yet touched the beer she'd brought him. It occurred to Wade that she was showing him tremendous patience. Refusing a beer was very insulting in Ursulian culture. He not only implicitly refused it, but had deemed it a small favor. Perhaps she spent a lot of time in Caden, or perhaps she wanted something. Wade guessed both. He took the beer with his right hand and had a sip. She didn't skimp. It was old barracks ale, fine quality, subtly spiced with a clean linger. It was likely the most expensive beer the bar had on offer. I'm Wade, he said, raising his cup. Thank you for the beer. May it be the first of many, she said, her cup meeting his with a firm clack. Wade, she said, alighting on each sound to try the name out. Her accent caused the D to sound softer than he'd ever heard it before, almost a T, almost as if his name were Wait. I'm considering signing on with Bryant Nolan's caravan as a guard, she continued. The time draws near for me to head home, so it's a convenient happenstance that, if I wait a day, I can travel in company and be paid a bit for it. I understand that you are also a part of this venture. Yes, said Wade. As a settler, though, not a guard. Headed to a new home? My reasoning is the opposite of yours. You seek to return home. I seek to leave it. I hope for adventure, not for exile, she said. A bit of both. I meant it in jest. I hope I didn't offend. I can't imagine anyone taking issue with a listener. Sometimes people don't like what I hear. Martha nodded at this, gazing into her pint and pursing her lips. Do you listen here? She asked, looking over at the bar where most of tonight's patrons were gathered. Is there much to hear within these walls? I can't say, he said. I was interrupted. He displayed his beer and at last returned her smile. Best part of the evening, to be sure. Tell me, what's it like to hear the voice of someone who's passed on but remains? Wade took a deep breath and glanced about the room to see whether anyone was within earshot. This kind of talk probably wouldn't unnerve a cleric of Harker, but not everyone had such resolve. It's usually uninteresting, he said. People leave small pieces of themselves everywhere, but much larger pieces when they die. A fragment may be a scene, a phrase, or a tune, a subtle emotion. Much of the time, it's just noise, a soft cacophony like a constant windstorm ravaging the side of a cabin, or at times it's like a very crowded bar. Constant, she said, incredulous. That would drive me mad. It's always in the background, but I have years of training and practice keeping it there. For your entire life? No, since my youth. But the training started very early. Those with the gift can see it in others long before it awakens. We're always on the lookout for our kin. Martha studied Wade again. He had warm brown eyes and a beard, full and well-groomed. His wavy black hair just touched his shoulders and often got in the way of his eyes. There was a tired gentleness to those eyes, akin to a retired captain watching his horde of grandchildren read stories around a fireplace. His age is hard to pinpoint, she thought. His skin is too smooth to be as old as 30, but his manner is too grave to be as young. She took a moment to notice the din of the other conversations in the bar. Raw, indiscernible clamor with no way to focus on any one of them. She tried to imagine what it might be like to know she could never escape it, to never experience quiet again. How does he stay so calm, she wondered, being burdened by constant noise? How can his eyes tell the story they do? She leaned closer to Wade and tucked a stray and fiery tuft of hair behind her ear. Though most of it is uninteresting, she said. What of the times that it is interesting? Well, he said, when they're strong enough, Their voices can be much like yours or mine, as if they believe they still walk among us. Some of them know that they don't belong here, but they don't know how to leave, or they don't want to. In any case, it's my duty to help them move on. Emma, thanks for that follow, friend. Oh, that's very sweet of you. Thank you. Welcome to the fam. Do they always take kindly to your help? Wade shook his head and said, No, but they don't often present a danger either. Often they lack any awareness that I'm even present. They're so absorbed by whatever occupies them. For instance?
The Emperor protects us.
Oh, Munu, thanks for that host, friendo.
Praise the
It's good to see you.
Emperor and strike down his foes.
Once, a cloth seller that insisted upon triple-checking his inventory in life left that piece of himself behind. It was strong enough to haunt his old warehouse, where his inheritors heard his counting and coughing. That sounds harmless, she said. Well, it was harmless, but fragments powerful enough to be heard with the ear feel very unnatural, especially to those who knew the deceased. It can really unnerve people and make their lives very difficult. And you sent him on his way. How? I listened. I can't hear your thoughts because they're still contained in you, but the thoughts of a fragment are out in the open. I could hear not only the words he was speaking, but the words he was thinking. He didn't believe his sons were keeping close enough attention on the ledger. Turned out he was right. One of the three had been cheating his siblings. Have I just stumbled upon your reason for flight, Wade? That smirk. And that T sound again. Wait. No, he said. Though that brother was less than pleased with what I revealed, he was outnumbered and already suspected. And once the ledger was corrected, the fragment moved on. So the spirit wished for his son's crimes to be exposed? No. The fragment simply wanted the inventory to be accurate. Marsta laughed. So simple. That is its own piece. Only a fragment, after all. Not the whole. You drink so slowly, she said, draining her cup. Do you like to savor? Wade nodded. When it comes to good beer, there's no other way. Also, I've been preaching. What of you? Why has a cleric of Harker traveled as far as Caden? I wanted to see what you kids are like. What have you concluded? He asked. That you're all a little proud and a bit insular, she said. Having only 2 neighbors may be the reason. Inurian's people are worldlier in general, but more guarded, perhaps because of your other neighbor, who I learned it would be unwise to visit directly. Stalthus, Wade said. Stalthus is a mess since their coup 3 years ago now. If anything, that's brought Inurian and Caden closer. I was in Inurian for a short time. I learned only that Inurians hold no love for Stalthus and much love for Cadic beer. Perhaps if Stalthus would build more breweries, they could improve their standing. I think they'd do well to take your advice. If only, said Marsta. Politics bore me. I think they wouldn't bore me if beer was the accepted solution. Beer is often the solution, said Wade. Always, I'd say. I wonder, she whispered, raising her cup to her ear, if we would listen to beer, what would it have to say? Again that smirk. One side of her mouth higher than the other, one eyebrow raised. No doubt a skill she'd spent years honing. I think you're right, said Wade after a long moment. Cades are a bit insular. Not you, she said. You recognized Harker's symbol. You're sharing your table and mind with me. I like you, Wade, she said. Wade the Cade. You have an honest air about you, and you're perceptive. She paused, slowly spinning her mug with one finger on its handle. Tell me, this Bryant Noland, what do you make of him? The man leading the caravan. Wade shrugged. He seems well-meaning for a merchant. The Hollis-bound caravan is his, which is really all I'm interested in. Marsta winced and waved her hand as if swatting away a field sting. Bah! Hollis is politics, she said. King of the Cade sticks through the spine, crosses the bridge, turns a large cart stop into a town. Nolan claims it's independent, but I think everybody knows what the bounty of its tariffs will trickle to. That's a lot of boring politics, said Wade. This is politics I must suffer, she said. It may affect the price of beer. I expect it will. Why do you go to Hollis? She asked. His spine tensed. The river, he thought. The Sinlayan is a mile wide. Running water was rumored to serve as a barrier to fragments. He would put that rumor to the test. A fresh start, he said. I have some skill at mending wounds, so a frontier town like Hollis will have a lasting use for me. You intend to settle there? Yes, for a time at least. What if the town doesn't survive? It may not, Wade thought, and not for the first time. 2 weeks' travel from Caden proper was too far away to hope for any kind of aid. Bandits, fire, sickness, a food shortage. Things that would be a nuisance within Caden's borders could be disastrous to a frontier town. Trellis is just across the river, but far above and a 2-day ride from Hollis. Trellis is just as far from Caden. Both towns might fail. Wade shrugged and shook his head. I don't know, he thought. Then it occurred to him that Ursul was also on the far side of the river. That's the adventure part of my reasoning, he said. Chapter 1. I missed a little bit of chat. Let me catch up if I can. Oh, that's I like the chatter. It's just about how many. I'm glad you're enjoying it. That's really nice. Barley wine and whiskey. Hollis and this world predates distilleries. They have wine. They have a lot more beer. They don't have hard spirits. It's kind of so. I run almost all of my D&D campaigns pseudo 1250 to 1390. Like that's the technology age and sort of like cultural expectations and food. It's rooted in there with some transformations because of magic. But yeah, that's kind of where I put it. So thank you, Tide Strider. I do my best. I was a little nervous. I am always nervous about reading my stuff just because, you know. Also, I'm freezing. I should run and grab a sweater in a second. But gifted some Basil Hayden. I don't know if that is. You like rye. Yeah, no spirits. No spirits. They don't have spirits. I mean, there are ghosts, there are spirits, but Wade would be quick to correct you that according to his religion and knowledge, there's no such thing as a ghost. People don't leave their full person behind. But I've kind of already spoiled that for you, right? There's literally the king of Ursul is a ghost in the campaign. I don't know that that's going to be true in the book because it's not going to really mesh with some of the other shit that's going to happen. But spoiler, there are ghosts. And it won't surprise you to learn that Wade's going to deal with them. So thank you, Beerless. Thanks, Ted. All right. I am going to get a sweater because I am actually cold. And I'm going to take that break. We have 3 minutes before pre-rolls are reactivated, so I'm just going to run the ad now just to kill it. So it's 1 minute and 30 seconds. Nothing interesting happens during the ad break. I'm not even going to be at the keyboard. I'm going to walk up and down my hallway to stretch my legs and grab a sweater. I recommend you all do too. Stand up, stretch your legs, click over tab, say hi to Fraggy, or at least check in. She's usually doing okay. Refill your drinks. And I'll be back in a second. You're all dope. Oh, I have to click a button. There we go. Be right back. Hydrate or distrate. Just in time. I made it. I am going to read chapter 2 now because I have a thing to keep me warm. There we go. Esma. I'm so sorry I mispronounced your name when you followed, friendo. I missaw it because my font needs a little massage. Excellent timing, Smithers. All right, hang on. Thanks, Ian. How you doing? All right. Recap for those of you who missed the first chapter, which I guess took me about 20 minutes to read. Wade and Marster are both priests of different religions, clerics. Wade serves the goddess of death, and Marster serves a god of fighting. And they had a talk over beer about where they're going, which will be further discussed in chapter 2. Okay. Marsta lingered in the comm room after Wade had retired. That had been her most interesting chat of the day, she thought. She tried to acquaint herself with as many of Nolan's caravanners as she could. Some had been easier to pin down for conversation than others. She'd met the no-nonsense blacksmith, Russ, a married pair of tailors, Aya and Aldous, the 3 Vesfer brothers and their wives, all carpenters with big families. There's a footnote here. What's the footnote? How to pronounce Aya. It's like, that's why Ironside had trouble tripping over your name, because that character right there is pronounced I. The 3 Vesper brothers and their wives, all carpenters with big families, and an apothecary, Sarah. Each had their lives and families loaded onto wagons on the street outside, waiting for tomorrow morning. They all seemed like decent folk, though only the smithy and apothecary knew anything true about the world outside of this little crater. The others were a touch wide-eyed with hope and worry, a wise approach to any adventure, if an uninformed one. Wade was an interesting sort, and the only member she'd met that wasn't traveling with family. He's not clergy, not precisely, though what his proper role was within his church, she couldn't quite say. He handles ghosts, she thought. That must take its toll on a still living soul. She wondered whether each ghost was always its own puzzle, or whether confronting one could come to blows. How does one fight a fragment, as he called it? She would have to ask. For a man who's trained his entire life to be unburdened by thoughts, thought Marsta, he certainly seems encumbered by his own. He was attractive and engaging, but too broody. He'd need to get over that to make a family. Though some people are into that sort of thing, she mused. Then again, maybe he's not the family-making type. Marsta tipped her cup back and let the final drops of ale trickle into her mouth, taking a moment to savor its sweet undertones. The beer here is good, thought Marsta. It lacks the kick and proper mulling of a piping hot northern brew, but it almost makes up for it with its richness. Almost. Her plan now was to check on Bess in the stable, to see that he'd been properly tended to, then head to bed. It's not that she didn't trust the stable hand to do a competent job. Bess was a long way from home. She rose from the table and felt the slosh in her mind of having had too much to drink. Steadying herself on the table with her left hand, she grasped her talisman with her right and muttered a soft prayer to Harker, one of the first incantations she'd been taught as a novice. The prayer's intent was to remove poison from the body, which, if one were to nitpick, includes even pleasurable poisons. It took only a small moment for her drunkenness to ebb away. Since her plan to check Bess still made sense with a clear head, she decided to follow through with it. The entry room and common room were separated only by a too-wide door frame. You don't like door frame, Google? Why do you like door frame? Worked like, okay, fair enough. There you go. Without doors. Through the frame, she saw the merchant, Brian Noland, arguing in hushed but audible tones with a younger woman who was much his likeness. Marsta slowed her approach, unsure whether she wanted to barge in on a heated conversation between her new employer and a family member. In her Sewell, if a conversation was meant for hushed tones, it was often held in private. Otherwise, if it was loud enough for anyone to hear, it was as much a spectator event as any duel. It may become a duel if it drags on long enough. Though, to be fair, thought Marsta, that's actually true for either type of conversation. Pa, said the young woman, they don't close the gate to keep out highway bandits. Something more serious is out there, and we're putting the entire caravan at risk if we go now. We should wait until the highway watch gives an all clear. The only things out there are wildlife and frontier folk, Nolan replied, his frustration almost eclipsed by his sheepishness. Sheepishness, my gosh. And neither of those number great enough to be a problem for us. It's not been open even a year yet, so nothing could have settled in the forest. Hollis and Trellis both have buildings and citizens already. And you think they didn't notice a third but more sinister settlement being laid down in the King's own highway? I think the King's army doesn't lightly close the King's beautiful new gate. Nolan sighed, and then they both caught sight of Marsta. Sorry to intrude, said Marsta, stepping forward. Apologizing was appropriate, maybe, though by acknowledging her was Nolan inviting her thoughts. This matter was a concern of hers. Are you considering a delay in our departure, Nolan? She asked. Nolan and the woman exchanged sharp glances at one another. They're definitely family, thought Marsta. They both coached their own faces into pleasantries as they turned to face her. Marsta of Thakbodan, said Nolan, turning to greet Marsta. His transition from chastised to salesman was impeccable. Always an honor. I'm happy to know you decided to sign on. Please, meet my daughter, Melissa. It's an honor, Madam Marsta, said Melissa, placing her hand on her chest and giving a slight but polite bow. Her smile was kind, but still bore the burden of her frustration. Oof, madam, she calls me, said Marsta, wincing as if she's gotten a mouthful of spoiled vetch. Marsta will do. I'm happy to meet you as well, Madam Melissa, but unhappy to learn that I may be stuck here or even forced to return to the northern mountains if the gate is to remain closed. No, not stuck, said Nolan. The writ I have will get us through the gate, no matter what, but that will do little to assuage my dear daughter. You're responsible for the lives of every settler on the wagon train, Pa, said Melissa. Right back to it, thought Marsta. And to that end, he said, I've hired protection. We have 6 armed guards, 2 of which are retired and decorated military officers, and we have the privilege of Marsta's skill as well. Discord, you doing me dirty. Why are you making sound right now, Discord? It's not the time. Discord, it's not the time. Here, let's just make you quiet. There we go. Jeez, Discord. No, Beerless is fine. You're allowed to message me. Discord's not. I want to meet these retired military officers, said Marsta. Are they staying here in the inn? I didn't either, actually. Yes, said Nolan, but they won't arrive until late this evening, possibly very late. You will arrange it? Sure, he said. Of course. I'm sure I can arrange that. Wonderful. Now, she said, turning to Melissa and putting her hands on her hips, tell me of this danger. I don't have details, Melissa replied, polite and undaunted, but they've never closed the gates, and they made a big deal about keeping them open all the time. They weren't even going to put doors on it initially. Now they're talking about closing it and barricading it. I didn't hear the word barricade, Nolan said, a strong note of pleading in his tone. Who told you that? Mel, love, you're making this out to be something it's not. The gate guards last eve, off duty and drinking in the Sin's common room. They said their captain's afraid, Pa. And you believe this fear is justified? Continued Marsta. I believe that it's real, said Melissa. Marsta pursed her lips and nodded slowly. Maybe she misheard, she thought, but this girl's voice is firm and clear, and her gaze is steady. She's not prone to flights of fancy. Nolan, said Marsta, you said these officers will arrive tonight? Nolan once again appeared sheepish and frustrated. Why is that word so hard for me? Sheepish. That's good. But he still managed to look important, if not in complete control. Even his casual wear would pass for finery in Usterol, its subtle but distinctive silver threading along the seams and edges of his thick dark blue coat. A coat tailored to fit his barrel chest and subtle beer belly, a fine floppy hat with a silver tassel. He's not a man who's seen much in the way of exercise, let alone combat, she thought. More fat than muscle. Retired officers, Nolan replied. Retired, but still capable. And yes, he cleared his throat. Marsta, they will arrive tonight so we can depart tomorrow. On schedule, he added, punctuating by tapping a finger into his palm. Their officers retire from military service when they are still capable, thought Marsta. Is this politics or are they missing limbs? Well, she thought, a sword really only needs one good arm. It's Marsta. Once I am confident they can handle themselves, said Marsta. Melissa nodded with approval. She looked much like her father, thought Marsta. Her hair was dark brown, and her face was soft-featured. Her nose small, and her gaze was both discerning and demanding, much like her father. Except for the gaze. Her father's gaze was gentler. And the nose. Her father's nose was quite large, especially compared to Melissa's. Otherwise, Melissa's the picture of her father. Her clothing was somewhat less regal than his, a long blue skirt and a white shirt, but she still had a more commanding air than her father, and she seemed more comfortable with command. You're saying you won't go with us if you find the captains to be wanting? Asked Nolan, perplexed. I'm saying that the road is always dangerous, but if we find these captains wanting, we will not go yet. Marsta stepped closer and rested her hands on Nolan's shoulders. I mean, it's that clear in this scene. Maybe I should make it clear, but she's taller than Nolan by a lot. Marsta's very tall. Marsta's like 6'6", 6'7", somewhere in that category. Average height in this kingdom is like an average guy's 5'8". 6 feet is tall for a guy. Marsta is huge. Nolan is short. He's like 5'6". So that's the picture. Okay, she is huge, red hair. She is built like a linebacker. She's a tank. Just so you have the picture. Okay, she's big, freckled, Irish looking kind of, and really fucking beefy. She's strong. She's a tall queen. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. Nolan, your daughter has a keen mind and a level head. I don't know what pressures cloud your vision, but set them aside. If you can't see your own daughter's qualities shining through right now, you definitely can't see whether her concerns are warranted. Nolan's face went through a slow transition from offended to understanding. Marsta had hit a nerve, but it had been the right nerve. I'll talk to the gate guards, he said after a moment. I'll see what I can get out of them. Marsta, please let me know what you think of the retired captains. I like them, but if you think they're not up to your standards, we can, he paused, inhaling deeply to stone himself against his own doubts, we can delay and find some additional swords to hire. I'm all too happy to help, said Marsta, satisfied. Nolan gave a respectful bow to Marsta, fingers splayed and hand over his heart. He then kissed his daughter's hand and exited the inn, turning right towards the gate. Thank you, said Melissa, once her father was out of earshot. My father's being a bit short-sighted about this, but he has a good heart. He gave his word to the families that he'd get them to their new home. He doesn't want to let them down. Given that, said Marsta, why was he so resistant? What's the harm in delay? Well, I don't want to wait. Hollis isn't going anywhere. I think he's worried that we won't make it in time to make good on his land grant, which the settlers are all going to live and work on, as if that piece of paper actually holds any sway once we're outside of the gates. Does Hollis not respect the laws of your proper homeland? They're so far away there'd be a little reprisal for ignoring the crown law. It's one reason people might want to settle there. But we've already built houses on the plot. We're bringing a number of craftsfolk they desperately need there. Besides, my father's been out there twice already, so they know him out there. He's very likable. Oh, is that misspelling? It's been there for years. The writ might not work, but his words will. His words failed to work on you, said Marsta. She smirked and clapped Melissa on her upper arm. I know his game, said Melissa, sparing half an uncertain smile. And apparently so do you. He can talk circles around most anybody else. Just to listen to you, I'd guess you are nearly 30, but to look at you, I guess you're older than 20. So what is it? Melissa smiled and narrowed her eyes a bit, highlighting her amusement. I'm 22, said Melissa. You remind me of myself at your age, said Marsta. You're more civil, more patient, but no less strong. That's very high praise, said Melissa. But this is all easy compared to the things you've confronted, I bet, she said, sparing a matter-of-fact glance at Marcia's weapons. Bah, trust me, child, you have no reason to doubt yourself. You have a warrior's fire in your heart, I can see it. Child's a weird word to hear in reference to myself. I haven't really played the part of a child since I was 12. Trust that I meant no offense. Oh, no, don't worry about it. The word makes sense coming from you, though I wouldn't guess that you're much older than I am. Marcia chuckled and crossed her arms. Good. Let's stick with your not guessing. 40. Oof! Marcia winced. Harker's broken scabbard 40. Do you see grey in this hair, youngling? Melissa took too long of a moment to study Marcia's hair, then said, Not in this light. At that, they both laughed. New idiom. Which idiom was that? I've read this text so many times, it's hard to find it sometimes. That I use Stone somewhere in this document? Stone himself. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Ooh, I think I hear Tiny Child. 1 second. Yeah, I have to go intercept. I'll be back in a moment. Chair stream. I love you. Poor little kid wet the bed. I have to obviously have to intervene in this. So entertain yourselves. Go visit Fraggy. I will be back, but it's probably going to be about 8 minutes. Hang in there, everybody. Tell everybody what happened. I return to you now. Thank you very much for entertaining themselves. There we go. I'm going to have a look at what you put in the Discord for me, Tide. Sorry, Beardless. Where's the button? Hi. I'm back now. Oh, gosh. Oh, there's lots of chat. I'm glad that you got chatting times. Sushi and too much sake. That sounds nice. Yeah, recovery day. I got you. Yeah, I'm sorry for that. That's really awful. Kid set. Yeah. So hey, the poor kid. He woke himself up peeing. He peed before he went to bed. I don't know. He must have downed a whole can of water in bed. He never does this. So like they usually have enough to sip, but he maybe they can fill their own cups now. This might be a new thing I have to adapt to deal with. And so he woke himself up peeing in bed, and then went to the bathroom, and then peed on the floor because he was too tired to hit the toilet. And I just hear him crying as I get there. That's when I ran back and said I got to deal with this. And then I ran back over there, and I was like, "But everything's gonna be okay." And I found out all the full spectrum damage. But he's okay. The bed took 0%. He must have been uncovered and lying face up when he woke himself up. And then I guess he caught more of it than he realized he did, because he also put a significant his underpants were basically soaked, and not the sheets at all somehow. And then there was a lot of liquid on the floor. So I don't know how this worked out, but it is the best possible way for this situation to play out. And I already had a towel in there that was ready to shuffle its mortal coil. So down it went on the pee. It's just tile. It'll be fine. So I'm not too worried. And the PJs took the hit. Yeah. So I guess we're good. The poor kid was really sad because it's a rule. You only get up in an emergency, but he doesn't really understand what an emergency is, and is it? This is fine to get to pee. And he was really worried we wouldn't do tomorrow. We're gonna watch a movie in the or a speed run. They really like watching speed runs with me, and one of their favorites is the Super Metroid Impossible speed run. And we've watched that a couple of times, and we watched half of it. So he's excited to watch the other half of it tomorrow morning after breakfast, and then we're gonna make ice cream, I think. And he thought that all that would go away because he had, gotten out of bed and peed his pants. He thought he was in big trouble. So, yeah, he was like having duress. But I told him all that stuff's still going to happen. He seemed much relieved. So, poor kid. They hold themselves to such crazy high standards. That's not fair. Oof. 7 minutes. 7 minutes until I should just run an ad right then. It's like rack up the dollars, pennies. I get pennies per ad. Ms. Behaving. Oh, that's adorable. Nice class. That's really good classware. Thank you, Beardless. Well, it's not my first rodeo over the dad stuff. Single dad in it for quite a while now. Yeah. Kind of have it down. Okay. So that was chapter 2. I will refill my water glass. That was water pouring into a glass. Literally. Next to kind of expensive sound equipment. I probably should have done that. I'm very bad. Okay. I love this chapter. Can I just say I love this chapter because, like, the first chapter is mostly Wade. Hey, coffee. We're doing well here. Thanks for the follow, friendo. Yeah, we're going to read chapter 3 right now. I was just talking about how these two chapters, the first chapter is mostly Wade's point of view with a little dash of Marsta's as you get to know the two. Obviously they're two of the most important characters in the story. The story has a lot of major characters. I mean, Nolan and Melissa are both very important too. You'll meet a couple of others very, very soon now. But these two, like the relationship between Wade and Marcia is basically going to be brother and sister kind of like camaraderie through the whole story. And I just love, they're so different, right? Marcia is this like sarcastic fucking brawler of a badass who's just like jovial and sees the bright side in every time, but does not hesitate to get down to business. And I mean, I don't want to spoil, you're all getting to know Wade, but it's just really nice seeing the two interact like this. And so, of course, 2 is from her point of view, and it's just like her internal monologue. I really enjoy that. I'm so glad the dad energy tag worked. I think I'm the only one using it right now. There should be more dads doing it. We need more dads on Twitch. Thank you very much, Coffee. Cool. That's very nice of you to say. We sure do. We sure do. We sure do. In fact, chapter 3, I think, is the Nolan chapter. Is it? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Are we ready for Nolan's point of view, everybody? This is my first, I mean, I don't really do the writing on Twitch. Maybe I should write on Twitch. That might actually help me get writing. Maybe that's not a bad idea, maybe. You write on Twitch, Coffee? You know, Dad Energy, D&D campaign stuff? Yeah, it could be too. I get it. Tide Strider's got an ulterior motive, which is to get me run. I know, I'll do it. Thanks, Ladies Anvil. We'll do self-care. It's good to do it now because it's really a 4-minute warning. That's interesting. The timers, maybe not exactly. I may have to adjust the timers now that it's automated. I do need food badly. Blue Wizard's parched. All right. So I'm going to do the 1.5-minute thing to disable pre-rolls so that when new folks like Coffee Quills come in, they don't have to see a stupid pre-roll ad and they don't miss anything important. And then after that, I'm going to read the Nolan point of view chapter, which I also really love. So I'm excited to share that with you. This is a 1.5 during which nothing interesting happens. I'll actually take advantage of it to go check on the bean because he should have tucked himself back in just to make sure he's okay. And then we're going to read it. We're going to do it. Yeah, fair enough, Tides. I got you. I don't mean to needle you for it. I enjoy being needled for it because I love D&D. We'll talk about, I had a D&D redeem very early in the stream's life. We'll talk about that in a second. In exactly a 1.5 minutes, nothing interesting happens right now. Okay? The timer is pretty exact. Text someone who you know is awesome that you love. Just text them out of nowhere and be like, hey, I think you're cool. And let that be your 1.30. Also, hydrate, because Coffee Quills, do friend of the show, asked us to do that. I'll be back in 1.30 minutes. Don't make a liar to me, Twitch. I guess the ads don't always run the full 1.30 minutes, but they can, so I always wait 1.30 minutes. It's not interesting. We're just talking about ads. Ads are like the opposite of interesting. No, Beardless, no. I don't want people to think they have to sub. No, I don't sub just to get around. I run the ad break and don't do anything interesting. The only exception to that is when Quinn is on with me and he's had too much Red Bull, and then he will make interesting things happen during the minute and 30 seconds because he gets nervous about not doing interesting things. Y'all are troublemakers and rebel rousers. Now I can't even see chat. I took my glasses off. So when I first started streaming, when I was trying to figure out what kind of redeems would be good and what kind of a stream to do when I was doing Dark Souls, I knew Dark Souls wouldn't be forever. I added a redeem called What Would DM Thades Do? And the idea was that folks could ask me questions about their campaigns or situations they encountered in them. Hi, Fox Trader. Welcome on in, friend. And that I would walk them through how I would do it. And it was not a very often used redeem, but it was pretty fun. It is an epic fantasy based on my Dungeons & Dragons campaign, actually. I'm 15 years into writing it. Yeah, you're right, though, Ty Trader. You're right. I mean, by the second conversation, the third ad, it was just the meme value of it. But. Okay. What? Sorry. All is well. All is well. Only happy messages on my phone. That's always nice. No messages about folks that peed their pants, which is good. Or if they peed their pants, they didn't tell me that as part of the message they sent me. So. All right. Chapter 3. Noland. So the last chapter, we found out, just to catch people up, the setup is there's a number of these folks that are going to go from, where's the map? I should just have the map up, right? Because then people will see the map and be like, oh, this guy means serious fucking business. I mean serious business. There's the map, okay? The map of the world. And these people are going to leave Caden from right here and go through the Iron Spine. They just dug this fucking massive tunnel to get to Tellus. I think it's actually called Trellis in the book. And then to Hollis across the way. Trellis and Hollis, okay? Hollis is the goal. Hollis is a frontier town that Caden has established in order to get a better foothold on trade because Caden previously is isolated. That's why they want this trade hub. That's why they're going there. Noland is heading the caravan because he's the one running that whole operation, which we're about to find out, basically. So, Chapter 1, we meet Wade, we meet Marsta. Chapter 2, Marsta talks to Noland and his daughter Melissa about the fact that there is apparently some kind of holdup at the gates to the tunnel. Or not, it's not a tunnel, the path, the road, the King's Highway, they call it. They won't let people through the door because something scary happened out there. Noland wants to go anyway, and his daughter is really worried about it, not because she's scared, but because she's practical. And so Marsta talked Noland into being more sensible about it and trusting his daughter. Now Noland is going to go to the gate and figure out what's actually going on out there. But remember that Noland has an agenda, which is to get there by any means. And now we're going to get a little bit of a hint as to why. That's the setup. Now you're all caught up. All right. Thank you very much. I'm really proud of this map. I'm really happy with it. Okay. I really appreciate that. All right. Me. Why is the gate closed? Nolan wondered. The king had hired the entire Ultis Miners Guild to work the mountain for a full decade. He'd even contracted the Magus Guild to remove... Should I put a J instead? Everyone knows that means mage, right? Maybe I should fucking change that. I'm not allowed to change anything in the first 7 chapters. I have to write forward. That's a note for me, not for you all. To remove and shape some of the rock, making a spectacular walled corridor open to the sky instead of a simple tunnel. The tall, flawless walls had been engraved with the crests of the royal family, immortalizing 15 generations, including old Kirigard herself. The project was so extravagant that Noland really believed they'd sooner surrender the city to bandits than close the gate because of them. Wade, W-E-Y-D. I got you. But yes, I mean, there's something about W-A-D-E and wait. Like, there's a very obvious themes I'm kind of hitting the reader over the head with. If you're so your misspelling is actually very appropriate. Maybe you get that. So, not bandits then, he thought. So yeah, Wade is a cleric of the goddess of death. That's right. It is a goddess, she who suffers no name and has nicknames, right? Harker has a name. The goddess of death also has a name, but no one remembers it. And that's going to come up. So, thanks, Nightbot. That's very sweet of you. That's okay, Beardless. I got you. And yeah, Harker is a god of combat and smithing, essentially. Governor Bryant Noland. He hadn't yet said it aloud, of course. He'd been strongly urged not to until reaching Hollis. And it's a good idea. A merchant arranging a settler's caravan to a frontier town wouldn't raise too many eyebrows, but the new governor would net a great deal of unwanted attention. Hire me. Choose me. Oh, the governor is leading my wagon train. Can I get a better land grant? My debts forgiven? Your coin purse? Why did I do this to us? Well, if I can't get us through the gate, he thought, we could trade my governorship for the financial ruin and disrepute I'd been headed for. Maybe we'd then get to be exiles in Hollis instead. The gate was a 15-minute walk from the Noisy Dragon, but it was easily visible the entire time. The closed doors were built right into the mountain. They stood 2 stories tall and were wider than any barn doors. They were 3-layer oak, lacquered in the king's green and gold, and each door was reinforced with a dozen gold-painted iron bands. They'd be sound protection against an invading army, if they could be closed in time. Well, they're closed right now. Yeah, Marsha's very large. That's true. Tall queen, as you called her. 2 of Her Majesty's soldiers were visible as he approached the gate, each with a pike in hand and a sword belted to their hips. They weren't simple town watch, but that should be a single. Thank you. But honest members of the king's army, their king-colored tabards bearing an eagle and a harp under the crown. The guards leaned against the doors to the king's highway very near one another. One was whispering and mimicking dice throwing with his free hand, the other stifling a hearty chuckle with his. The door to the guardhouse was partly open, its lights spilling out and illuminating their faces. They were in a good mood, thought Noland. That will make things easier. Good evening, young men, said Noland, touching his hand to his chest, fingers splayed, covering his heart with all the respect and humility of a diplomat. He smiled at each of them in turn, making eye contact and checking their shoulder markings to determine which outranked the other. Their markings were identical. Good evening, sir, said the one on the right. The one on the right had been the chuckler. He had pointed nose and a bowl-sized jaw. He righted himself upon noticing Noland, giving a brief but courteous bow. The other, a shorter fellow with a pug nose and a face to match, had been the joke-teller. He continued to lean against the massive closed gate, giving a curt nod instead of a bow. How can we be of service? Asked the chuckler. I'm leading a caravan out of here tomorrow, heading east into the valley, said Noland. Yet His Highness's gate is closed? Till further notice, sir, said the joke-teller, with an unspoken hint of what of it in his voice. I'm not sure whether we're letting people out, said the chuckler, sparing a quizzical look for his companion, but we're definitely not letting people in. Not that anybody's come knocking since I took this post. Or scratching, said the joke-teller. All that monster talk is slosh, said the chuckler. Yeah, well, tell that to the captain, said the joke-teller. One day, King says the gate'll be open forever and ever. Next day, one patrol goes off, don't come back, we close the gates. That'll make the king real happy when he finds out. A patrol went missing? Hasn't reported in yet, sir, said the chuckler. That's what missin' means, said the joker. More than like deserted. I certainly would if the post I worked to get was handed to some dandy rich boy. They're on the wrong side of the gate to enjoy their early retirement, if that's so, said the chuckler. Wouldn't much enjoy it clapped in irons here, said the joker. Is the captain in? Asked Noland. Both guards nodded, first in the affirmative, then toward the open door. The chuckler took the trouble to point. Still awake, last I knew, said the joker. He's worse company now than usual even, but help yourself. Nolan thanked him and entered the guardhouse. The small entry room to the barracks served as an office with a single desk, at which a man little older than Melissa was sitting. He was very young for a captain, especially for such a high-profile placement. The captain was clean, very well dressed, but looked to be at the end of his rope. His face was at least 2 days unshaven, his fingers were snaked into his tousled black hair, holding his head off of the desk. His desk was covered in paperwork, none of which had his attention. Nolan closed the door behind him, allowing the latch to announce his entry. The gate captain flinched, but quickly collected himself, easing his fingers out of his nest of hair and pulling it away from his face. He didn't speak at first, instead looking Nolan up and down, his eyes widening like a man confronted with an approaching forest fire. He shut his eyes tight for a moment to collect himself, looked into Nolan's eyes, and asked, "Are you here to relieve me of my command?" Bryant Nolan's parents had been merchants. That's a plural and a wrong article there. Thank you. Bryant Nolan's parents had been merchants. His grandparents on both sides, too. Negotiation was a key element in bartering, so it was a skill passed on as a family tradition, much like a family of bakers would pass on their coveted sweet cake recipe. Trade is a business where there were often surprises. Surprises which one can't let on are surprises. If they waylay you with information, they gain an advantage, but it's a bigger risk than most realize. It's a play that lesser experienced merchants don't recognize as a gambit, but it's just that. If they expected to surprise you, and you instead convinced them that they'd failed, then they just handed their advantage to you. This information crashed upon Nolan's experienced defenses like any other. He looked not in the least bit surprised. The boy, no way around it now, that's precisely what this captain is, thought Nolan, must believe him to be important due to his state of dress and calling at this late hour. He's also expecting someone to come and fire him. Why? "Why don't we start with what happened, Captain?" said Nolan. The captain leaned back in his chair and exhaled loudly. "They wanted me to trim costs. When I took command, they were running 3 patrols a day, each a 4-hour ride, 4 riders. That's a lot of feed and stable space for mounts, especially since so few are using the road yet. So I thought one of the patrols could be reduced to 2 or 3. Then they could go out for only 2 hours on foot, just for a little while. So I sent 2. Told them to hike out a few miles and back, just sticking to the road. Then they didn't come back, so no worries. I thought they were the midday patrol, so the late patrol would find them, bring them back if they were hurt or something. But they didn't find them. 2 soldiers gone. Not a trace. My first week, and I lost 2 soldiers. They told me to try and trim down expenses. Losing 2 soldiers isn't probably what they had in mind." "Is it possible that they deserted?" asked Nolan, thinking back on the conversation with the gate guards outside. "Maybe they did a little drinking out in the field?" "Deserted?" asked the captain. "Drunk? These were good soldiers, not the vermin I put in the night watch. Logren was up for promotion when I arrived. Dinner's got a fine record, too. There's no way I could convince the marshal they abandoned their post. And where would they go out there besides it's 5 days to Charlestown Mountback, and they weren't mounted?" "Maybe they just got lost? All they need to do is walk away from the sunrise, and the mountain's walls would guide them home. You can't miss the entry to the corridor, no matter how drunk you are." And the late patrol didn't find anything at all. "No," breathed the captain. "The town's loaning me their tracker tomorrow, so I'll get some kind of answers, assuming he doesn't get taken too." "Taken by what?" Why else would the 2 finest soldiers at this gate not come home after a routine patrol? Something got them out there. Wolves or something. Who knows what's out there? The captain leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk and his face in his hands. "But is that my problem anymore? That's it from me then, yeah? Bones of the nameless," he muttered. "My father will disown me." So his father's connections got him this cushy job on King Cadenson's new gate, Nolan thought. Probably a job everybody thought would be both impressive sounding and dull. Now he loses 2 soldiers during his first week. Poor kid's in over his head. Maybe he really did want to barricade the door. "So that's why you closed the gate?" asked Nolan. "That should be a comma," You're right, Google. That should be a comma. Thank you very much. Whatever got them isn't getting into this town, said the captain. I'm in deep enough as it is. I can't ride this charade by omission anymore, thought Noland. Besides, this is probably our ticket out of here. There are a lot of things that could threaten a pair of soldiers and pose no threat to a fair-sized caravan. Assuming the 2 missing guards actually didn't desert or do a little carousing in the woods. Relax, Captain, said Noland. I'm not here to relieve you of duty. I'm here to lead a settler's wagon train out to the river settlements by way of His Majesty's highway. I've got a complement of guards coming with me, 24 people all told. We'll send word back once we get to Trellis. The captain looked up, slowly, his eyes heavy with fatigue. He looked almost disappointed. Did he want to be relieved of command? Settlers? The young captain said. You're going to Trellis? Hollis, actually, Nolan replied. All the way there. So if the 2 of them did head out that way for whatever reason, you'd most certainly run into them. Or somebody who has. If nobody in Trellis or Hollis has seen them, that's news too. I'll send word back either way. Carts. Settlers? It will take you 10 days to get to Trellis. True, said Nolan. That's a lot of time for your tracker to spend out there, combing every inch of ground. We've got provisions enough for him if you'd like to put his services under my charge. A small measure of tension waned from the captain's face, and he licked his lips. He stood slowly and leaned over the table. What time do you want to head out? The captain asked. Oh, I like this chapter. I really, is it okay if I just like pat myself in the back for this? I love Brian Nolan's, like, he'll do this thing in the dialogue where he'll basically turn to the camera and explain why he understands what's going on. This whole thing where he catches someone off guard because, you know, this is the kind of thing I'm sure you've seen the equivalent if you've never given word name to it, right? It's kind of like here's a real cheeky example. I used to do this as a kid, like in my college years. So like if you see someone you think you know across a road or whatever, and you wave at them, and then they turn to you, and it's not who you knew. It's not who you recognize. You feel embarrassed. You feel like, you know, like, oh God, it wasn't the person I knew. What do I do? I just shrink away. And the other person's like, the fuck, I don't know this guy. Why are they waving at me? Right? But if that happens and you just look past that person and keep waving, then that person will look behind them and they feel, oh shit, it's not me they're waving at. You transfer the awkward to them. Right? It's a riposte. Kaboom. It's a little shots fired. It's not necessary. Just like it's making them deal with your feelings. Don't do that. But that's kind of the thing that Nolan's doing here. Right? That's that kind of thing. So you get it. You get it. You're with me. We're in this together. Okay. Glad we had this talk. And we're going to know a little bit more about why Nolan's doing this too. All right. I'm just going to roll right into chapter 4 because 4 and 5 are real good. I like them. 4 and 5 are I like them. They're in good shape. Chapter 4. You're a listener, aren't you? Asked the child. Wade broke his gaze from the dwindling cook fire he'd been staring into for the past hour. Its smoke against the fog-smothered forest had made for pleasant focus. 2 children confronted him. The interrogator was a young boy, no older than 8 or 10. The other, his younger sister, maybe 6. The blacksmith's children, if he wasn't mistaken. Their hair was black and curly, eyes green and deep, just like their father. Am I now? Asked Wade. I saw your pin, said the boy. Plus my mom says, added the girl. You're both very observant. You're right. I'm a listener. You sing the ghosts to sleep, whispered the girl. An old superstition about a listener's methods, thought Wade. One of the more charming ones. Wade let slip a little smile and ran his fingers through his beard. In truth, I don't sing, said Wade, which is for the best. If in death a person leaves pieces of themselves behind, I do what I can to return those pieces to them. Maybe it's not clear that he's making fun of himself here. I should probably put a little thing in there. He's kind of joking, but he's awkward about it because it's Wade. But that's what's happening there. I saw a ghost once, the boy said. Did you? Wade asked. How did it make you feel? I wasn't afraid, said the boy. What then? I don't know. I wonder what it wanted. I didn't ask it. It ran away as fast as I could. That's the proper thing to wonder, said Wade. What a fragment wants is a key to helping them. But it can be a riddle. Even the ones that speak clearly seldom tell us what they really want. Also, it's smart of you to have left it alone. Ghosts want to take over our bodies, said the boy, and eat our spirits while we sleep. Those are some of the less charming superstitions, but fair approximations of the risks involved. Wade turned to completely face them and pulled his hood back, resting his head on his hands and his elbows on his knees. They do sometimes mean us harm, said Wade, but it's rare, and it's never the case that hurting the living is truly what they need. It's a distraction some of them suffer. They need help. That's what I do. How do you hurt them? Asked the boy. Is it true they fear the light? Prayers? Banging a drum on a doorstep? They can't be hurt in the same way that you or I can, said Wade, and hurting them won't set them free. Each fragment is a puzzle, a story that's incomplete. If you help them finish their story, then they find peace. How do you do that? That depends on their story, said Wade. Sometimes it's simple. Sometimes it's not. Have you ever run away from one? Asked the boy. The farmhouse came crashing into Wade's mind. That should be a single word. What's this crap? The farmhouse came crashing into Wade's mind, its blinding inferno raging into view. He watched the thread fade. He wouldn't follow it. Not now. Yes, said Wade. My mom says they can't cross rivers, said the girl. Wade looked into her eyes. It wasn't a statement. She was asking him if it would work. She was the very picture of earnest curiosity and wonder. I've heard that too, said Wade. Answer, Tessie, leave the pastor alone. It's time to bed down now. The boy, Answer, dashed off to answer his mother's call. He called, well, goodbye, as he started to run. The girl, Tessie, lingered a moment, her eyes fixed on Wade's. Then she fled as well. Wade resolved to remember the children's names. Answer. Tessie. Mr. Wade, said Marsta, losing staring contests left and right, first with her cooking fire, then with a 6-year-old youngling. Wade smiled. Good evening, Marsta, he said. She sat on the ground beside him, setting her shield down between them and her scabbarded sword and mace atop it. She drew a pine-handled boar brush from her pouch in her belt and began the steady process of letting her hair down and brushing it out. 8 days, and you speak only with the Nolans and myself, she said. I'm flattered, but you really ought to get to know the others if you intend to be their neighbor. Isn't she awesome? I love her. I'm so glad you like her. Sidebar here. Marsta was a D&D NPC I invented for another campaign a long time ago that I loved her so much. And everyone in the game with her loved her so much that I ported her into the Hollis universe. And now she's like one of the main characters in the story. So, yeah, I'm glad you like it. I'm so glad. Thank you for saying that. The caravan was 8 days from the King's Gate at Rosaldi's Rest, well out of sight of the granite corridor the King's Commission had carved for the forest road. There wasn't much road to speak of beyond the impressive corridor, though. Misspelled, scarcely traveled, with markers every 20 paces, denoting where they were supposed to pretend the road was. It was at times obvious where previous caravans had cut away a thick route or dug up a stump to make travel for carts a bit easier. But if Wade didn't know to look for it, he wouldn't have seen signs of a road at all. So, said Marsta, do you think the younglings really saw a ghost? Actually, a bit of a brief aside. I might rework this part here. It's literally been years since I wrote this, and I wrote this one part quickly because I had more fun things to get to. But just in terms of an unmanaged forest, which is what this is how I think about this, by the way. This is an unmanaged forest. There would have been it should be easy to tell there's a road unless there's something about the forest that means there's no undergrowth naturally. And I'm not speaking to that at all, and I kind of think I should, but I'm not doing that here. But there is not a lot of undergrowth here. It's hilly, but there's not a lot of undergrowth. And nothing in this chapter indicates that that's the landscape, which is a deficit, I feel. So I'm glad we had this talk. So, said Marsta, do you think the younglings really saw a ghost? It's hard to say, said Wade. Could have been a trick of the senses. It must have been the latter, no? If they truly were haunted, I would have expected them to speak on it very differently. You said yourself a fragment. She lingered on the word a moment, making clear how odd she felt it was. Can make the living feel uncomfortable. Only if their fragment is strong enough, he said. He returned his gaze to the cook fire and replayed the short encounter in his mind. The children believed it, in any case. How long were you eavesdropping? Very briefly, she said. The youngs are adorable, and they're the first in the whole caravan to have the courage to approach you. I wouldn't have missed that for all the beer in Caden. Yeah, Chekhov's gun, you got it. The carts were pulled close to one another on the side of the road, with wedges under their wheels, each serving as a shelter for its family. Some were high-walled carts with tarp covers, others, that should be hyphenated, low-walled and open. Two of the families had no room in their carts, as they were small and packed with their lives, and so the families had been bedding down underneath them. With sunset past and twilight upon them, parents were getting their children to bed and shifting their conversations to softer tones. Easy end to another easy day, said Marsta. Still no sign of the missing patrol? Asked Wade. No, though Barbara says they've stuck to the road, said Marsta, which is odd, as we're 8 days out, and that's 8 days more travel than their task accounted for. Barbara? Our tracker, said Marsta, the man who joined us the morning we set out through the gate. You really haven't spoken with anyone other than Nolan and I, have you? Wade thought back on the trip so far. The children staring at him. Some of the adults, too, though they were more discreet about it. Nolan had told them all he was a pastor, which was close enough, but they all had knowing looks upon seeing his pin. They all had their own ideas of what it meant. I wonder why they went so far, said Wade. Maybe they really did desert. Maybe they were running from something? Nope, said the tracker. Pace was smooth and even since they left the gate. The newcomer took a seat across the cook fire from Wade and Marsta, leaning back on his hands and stretching his legs. Wade, said Marsta, this is Barber. He is the king's tracker. It's not a title I want or deserve, said Barber. Just Barber's fine. Nice to finally make your acquaintance, Pastor. Wade looked up and met the newcomer's eyes. I know, I'll get there in a second. Barber had sharp features obscured by a short, wispy beard and a well-trimmed mustache. His face spoke of irritation and puzzlement. And we are getting to a really fun part that I do not want ads to interrupt for people. So we're going to do it right now to get it out of the way. It's just a minute and a half, so pre-rolls get turned off. It's really, really brief. Nothing's going to happen. I'm literally going to sit here, and even though my subscribers will tell you interesting things are happening, you have to subscribe. You don't have to subscribe. Nothing interesting is happening. It's a meme. Don't buy it. I'll be right back. Don't trust my subs. This is holding the face until it automatically... There. Yeah, I do need to drink some water. I'll do that right now. I hate pre-rolls. Thank you for talking with me in chat while I waited for the fucking ad break to end. I do it so because pre-rolls being off mean that if folks come in, they don't have to deal with it in the middle of something cool happening. And I don't want this specific thing to be interrupted because it would be, it's no good. We don't want it. Stick with ethanol. Don't do that. All right. Wade looked up and met the newcomer's eyes. Barber had sharp features obscured by a short, wispy beard and a well-trimmed mustache. His face spoke of irritation and puzzlement. Likewise, said Wade. You're Rizaldi's tracker, then? I do odd jobs for the town watch there, including tracking, said Barber, which apparently extends to the king's gate guard as of yesterday. Usual affair for chasing down a runaway mountebank or trapping a fox. First time in a long time I've been looking for people. You sound as if you don't enjoy it, said Marsta. Oh, it's fine, said Barber. Pays good, even if this is a longer job than most. Tracking people's easier than animals, too, so this is the best I've had in a while. People are easier? Asked Wade. People have heavier steps. Animals have more respect for the ground. And the ground deserves respect? Asked Marsta, smirking and cocking her head. Only if you don't want it to tell others where you've been, said Barber. That's clever, she said, and sensible. So why don't you share with our pastor what you've learned of these runaways? Sure. He took a deep breath and sat up. They've stuck to the road, two of them stopping only a few times a day for meals, foraging, or to rest. They foraged and trapped enough, I think, they could have left Caden without any supplies at all. More and more like desertion, muttered Marsta. Seems that way, Barbara said, giving a curt shrug. Anyway, once or twice a day, they were followed by something for much of their midday travel. Something on all fours, large mountain lion or a mountebank, something else that size with 4 clawed toes. Is that unusual? said Wade. To be followed like that? Asked Barber. He shook his head. Nah, not at all. You can see where these two foraged, but you don't see refuse anywhere. Whatever was following them was probably enjoying the free snacks it was getting in their wake. Anything they dug up or trapped to eat but didn't finish, it finished. I didn't realize a mountebank paw was so similar to a mountain lion's, said Wade. Well, honestly, they're not, said Barber. Similar, but I can tell the difference usually. I don't expect it was a mountebank. That would have left droppings somewhere visible. Would have gnawed on the trees, of course. Pretty sure it's not a mountebank, but it's just a bit bigger than any mountain lion I've ever seen. Could be a wolf, but it'd have to be a real big one. I thought wolves traveled in packs, said Wade. They do. Could be a loner. Maybe. He shrugged and shook his head, his face tightening for a moment with his disappointment. Surely 2 trained soldiers can handle a single wild animal, said Marsta. Is followed after them every day? Every day after the first, said Barber. Came down from the north just after the tree line. Was on their tail for a few miles each day at least. I'm not sure how far behind it kept, but if they noticed it, they weren't bothered by it. Like I said, they kept an even pace each day, so this thing had come down, trace their steps without backtracking, then head back north. Not much cause for it to pick a fight with them if it was just cleaning up after him. Barber scratched his beard into disarray, pulled his hood over his head, and laid back on the ground. Could have been some animal I've never seen before, he continued. I don't know everything about this side of the iron spine. Nolan seems to think there's not much living out here, said Marsta. We've crossed 2 active deer runs, and enough of the ferns are chewed. I'd expect a small trap to feed me well enough I could make a home. There's definitely stuff living out here. How ominous, said Marsta, her signature smirk, stowing her brush. She produced a small cord from another pack and tied back her hair with it. Then the howls began, cutting through the billowing fog. The sounds were icy and discordant, first taking several turns, then a dozen in unison. The caravanners all stopped with their evening tasks and looked northward. Wolves? Asked Wade. Doesn't sound like any wolves I ever heard, said Barber. He hopped easily to his feet and stepped to the north side of the fire, shielding his eyes from the light and peering into the woods. Bloodied fog. They'll be on top of us before we see a hair of them. Not wolves, said Marsta, a touching credulous. She rose to her feet and brushed herself off. It sounds like bargeists. She trilled the R even more than usual, which your reader can't do, I'm so sorry, and hung a long moment on the last syllable. It almost sounded like ice. What? Barbara asked. Barlgeists, she repeated. They dwell in the northern mountains, very far from here. They're not very far from here, Marcia, said Barbara. It sounds like they're heading this way. Is that what followed the deserters? Asked Nolan, joining them from the carts. Barlgeists walk as we do, said Marcia, on 2 feet, not 4, though they're known to domesticate direwolves. What the blood's a direwolf? Asked Barbara. He unslung and strung his bow, running his fingers along the string. Why would they be so far south? Marcia asked, as if only for her own ears. Nolan was visibly struggling to remain calm as he approached them. Can you tell me what's going on? I'd like to assure the rest of the caravan that there's nothing to be concerned about. Didn't realize you were big on lying, Nolan, said Barbara. Hush now, whispered Marcia, angling her ear toward the sound. Do they mean us harm? Nolan pressed, his voice low. That's not a war howl I've ever heard, said Marcia. Sounds like they... She paused for a moment, pursing her lips. Sounds like a ritual howl, the kind of baying they do before a wedding or after a litter is birthed. But I can't answer your question yet, Nolan, not until we talk to them. You're going to speak to walking wolves? Nolan asked. Barlgeists, Marcia corrected him. And yes, I will speak to them. Don't be afraid, but hide the younglings in the carts, just in case. Nolan nodded, then trotted off, calling softly to the caravanners to do just that. Why only the children? Asked Wade. Because I don't want to disrespect the adults by telling them to hide in the carts too, said Marcia. She checked her hair tie, then picked up her sword and shield. It would be very unlike Barlgeists to attack travelers, she continued. But they may, and the veiling younglings won't improve our chances. Fear will rile the creatures up. Marcia called each of the guards by name, and they joined her at the front. First, the retired captains, Feldenmeyer and Winch. Both were a touch older than she, but still capable with a blade and suited to the battlefield. They didn't retire due to physical fatigue, she'd learned, but political fatigue. Not her favorite reason, but the most acceptable one given the context. At least they still had all of their limbs. Marcia, sorry. Next were Blake and Wordle. Youthful, unsavory characters, but also capable. There were to be 2 more, but they tried to strong-arm Nolan into bigger pay just before leaving, so this is it. If we cut these things, they'll die, right? Asked Wordle. Wordell, I think is how you pronounce it. I can't remember now. Wordell. Hand on hilt and eager. As with most things, said Marcia. That's Chekhov's gun, by the way. In this book, that's Chekhov's gun. She then turned to the caravan and said, Any of you who feel capable to protect your families, now is the time. Come forward and be ready. After a moment, many of the Cades came forward. The 3 Carpenter brothers, Mark, Tom, and Brad, Mark's eldest daughter, Brianne, stepped up with quarterstaves in hand. The farmers, Plathis and Kadsky, came, Plathis with hatchet, Kadsky with pitchfork. Russ Denon and his wife Marcy, the blacksmiths, wore simple but dense chain shirts, round steel shields, and wicked curved hatchets, each with wide blades and spikes at their poles. Conspicuously, Aya Geet did not come forward. Marcia figured her for a firebrand, but her husband Aldous was a nervous wreck even before embarking on this journey. Perhaps she was consoling him. Others didn't come, either due to age, lack of armament, or honest fear. Still, remarkable courage for the Cades, all told, thought Marcia. Perhaps a trait unique to those willing to make this journey. Most are unarmored, though. Then from the mists came the Bargeists, but not alone. A dozen of the newcomers were human, armed with blades, grinning like children who'd been gifted practice swords for the first day of thaw. Men and women, they each looked as though they'd slept in the woods for months without washing, their hair matted and dreaded, their faces and hands caked with soil. The other half of the company stood taller than even Marcia. 13 Bargeists, shaped like people but broad-shouldered, with almost Ursa-like faces. Several wore mail. The others were armored in thick tanned hides. Their fur was dark gray, striped with black, and well-groomed, in weird contrast to their companions. Their eyes had a human shape to them, but their stares were as piercing and frigid as their howls had been. Their irises were pools of dried blood, lustrous and twinkling in the forest twilight. Slowly, one by one, Their mouths opened, showing their narrow and wicked teeth. The whole lot of them lowered their heads, sinister and feral. They looked at the caravan like predators staring down a bird with a broken wing. With them all stood 2 massive direwolves, which were the most civilized in that company. "It's late," said Marsta, undeterred and light-hearted. "Come back tomorrow morning, and we'll share our breakfast and swap stories with you all." The Bargeists drew their axes and swords, and began to growl and grin. "Or linger," Marsta continued, her eyes narrowing, "and forfeit your lives to my rage." That's your best go at parley, is it?" muttered Barber. "I think we both knew the moment we saw them what our path was going to be here," said Marsta. Chapter 5's things are going to happen. Okay. I'm not going to cliffhanger you. We'll just roll right into it. All right, here we go. That wouldn't be very nice of me. Even though Chapter 4 is literally a cliffhanger. Bryant Noland had been a trader his entire life. Trade is a business where there was no shortage of risks, but its risks boasted a distinct lack of open violence. Nolan wasn't the kind of merchant to get his hands dirty, nor did he deal with any that were. He'd been nearly mugged once. The city watch had rounded the corner at that very moment, sending the brigade running empty-handed. The guard checked in with him. He was okay, it said. They hadn't noticed the plain evidence that Noland had been afraid. The howl of these fiends, dog things, humans, animals all, was out of some nightmare tailored to him. A perfect horror. I've got a... Can you see? Sif is right there. The sword teeth thing belongs to her. But not a bad idea. The howl of these fiends, dog things, humans, animals all, was out of some nightmare tailored to him, a perfect horror that chilled his skin with sweat and sped his heart and mind. He could hear the children whimpering in the carts, the mountebanks wrenching at their ties trying to bolt. In his mind's eye, he saw Melissa crying out to him to save her. His imagination forced him to watch as the Bargeists flayed her face and ripped her arms from her body, while in the dream and in the world he was frozen in place, soiling his pants with the wine she'd told him not to drink. "Pa!" yelled Melissa. "Get under the tarp!" He couldn't pull himself away. He watched the animals charge, and the caravan defenders, only 10 paces from him, falter. His protectors all stepped back, save one. Marsta slammed her sword upon the face of her shield, shouting with the strike, her voice clear and hard. Her chant rose above the cacophony of her approaching foes, and was a beacon in the mists, as if listening to her would somehow carry you to safety. "Battle in heart," she called. "Glory from faith. From our hearts fire, from our fire iron. From our iron their blood. Battle and heart! Battle and heart!" The caravan defenders rallied and reclaimed their lost steps, standing fast with enchanted vigor. They began to chant as she did. The song caused the Bargeists and wolves to hesitate and lose their speed, but their human companions did not, and so they reached the lines first. The carpenter's brothers, Vesper, wielded their staves as spears, thrusting them forward to strike their foes at a distance. Mark, the oldest, drove his staff hard into the throat of his enemy, putting a fast and certain end to him. Tom and Brienne struck the same target, one to the shoulder and one to the knee, sending her down. The final brother, Brad, faltered upon meeting the eyes of his enemy, a crazed stare painted with glee and raw bloodthirst. He stepped easily past Brad's thrust, and his blade sought to find the young carpenter's heart. Instead, the wild man met with the edge of Marsta's shield, and, with a sickening crack and a newly misshapen face, he fell. Marsta's blade swung true, opening the throats of 2 more and punching deep into the heart of another as his swing broke upon her shield. She continued her battle prayer, relentless. Did I misspell relentless? No, I didn't. Don't correct me. Chill down, Google. Yelling each word in rhythm with a strike or a block. Oh, I'm so glad, Bearless. Good pick. Seeing this sudden swing in the favor of the Cades, the Bargeists used their long legs and great speed to attempt to circumvent the battle, racing for the carts right at Noland. Barbara hit 2 with arrows, but failed to fell either. If I continue to stand here, thought Noland, if I continue to submit to this horror, and not summon the courage I need to flee, then I will die, and Melissa may have the moment she needs to escape. Melissa, he thought, I love you. Why have I done this to you? I should have done as you said. We should have waited. I should have hired more swords. We never should have left Caden. Your mother, will I see her again? Am I worthy? 13 Bargeists and 2 massive wolves rounded the melee, keeping the throng between them and the warrior Marsta. Even if she could get to them, thought Noland, she couldn't stop all of them in time. Some of them would die. Maybe Marsta could kill them all given time. But there was no time. And then Wade was there. Wade stepped between Nolan and the enemy, unarmed, arms down, palms open to them. Nolan was all at once enveloped in silence save one sound. Wade's whisper, as quiet as a leaf tumbling along a stone-paved street. This was not the kind, thoughtful voice of the man he had met. This voice had a hollow and unnerving quality, a disturbing cadence that stuck like tar to the skin. The voice was demented and sadistic, the very essence of malice, like a sick-headed man slowly crushing a cat in a vice, letting it draw what little breath it may within its iron grasp. This forest is old, said Wade. It has known more death than all of you can ever sow. I will show you. He raised his hands, clawing and straining against some force unseen, all at once pushing forward against nothing. Bright white and purple light erupted from Wade's eyes and mouth, seeming to consume the creatures, and all could hear his scream. It was the pained screeching of 1,000 crows set aflame. The Bargeists and wolves skidded to a halt, enthralled and terrified by Wade's spell. Nolan saw on their faces a greater fear than he himself had ever known. 2 of the Bargeists fled, yipping and weeping, sprinting northward. The rest of the creatures fell where they stood, their eyes frozen wide and glazed with death. The surviving humans fled as well, spared only because even the defenders were distressed by the sounds. Silence and stillness fell over the camp, and all eyes fell on Wade. What did he do to them? Asked Brianne Vesper. Marsta, Wade said, his voice labored. You speak their language? No, she said, confused. But I can understand some of it. Why? These ones are all dead. How did you... There's not much time, Wade said. He let loose a wheezy, dry cough and stumbled to the bodies. Please, come here. Marcia slung her shield over her shoulder and relaxed her sword arm as she approached Wade, curious and concerned. You look rather ragged, my friend, she said to him. You must sit down for a moment. You need water. Which one of these do you think has some authority? Continued Wade. The ones wearing mail? The lighter the fur, the more authority they bear, usually. Their fur lightens as they age. Wade knelt down beside one of the corpses wearing mail and laid his hands upon its face. Its fur did seem a shade lighter than the others, he thought. He muttered something to himself, a whisper that seemed to echo inaudibly through the forest and within everyone's ears. He then grasped its snout with both of his hands, anchoring his fingers in its lips. He leaned close and asked, Why attack the caravan? He wrenched its jaw open, and a whisper came in reply, harsh and guttural. What did it say? Wade asked. It's not dead, interjected Wardell. It's dead. Oh, sorry, wrong voice. It's dead, said Wade. Marsta. Wade, this is... She started, seeming unsure for the first time in Wade's experience. It said Caden will burn, and something about fulfilling their end of a bargain. Wade moved to another with mail and repeated the procedure, asking, "How many more? How many more threaten this forest?" Again a response whispered in the Bargeist's own tongue. "Harker's shattered blade," said Marsta. "It said the clans are united. It must be lying." "It can't lie to me now," said Wade. He moved to the last with mail and asked, "Who struck this bargain with you?" Silence. "Shit," said Wade, slumping to sit on the ground. "Out of time." Marcia took a moment to collect herself, gathering a fistful of leaves from the forest floor to clean the blood from her blade. She looked at the caravanners. All of them looked haggard, most frightened as well. They needed to move the caravan from the site if they were to get any sleep. Not that moving would be enough for them to find rest now. No injuries, though. Thanks to Wade. Wade spoke softly, but in the silence of the battle's aftermath, all of the caravanners could hear. "All creatures," said Wade, "when they die, leave small pieces of themselves behind. Sometimes those pieces find their way to their owners on their own. Sometimes they become trapped here. And when we can, a listener will send them home. But there is one piece that everything leaves behind in death. One piece that always stays here, that listeners never shepherd across. It is the pain of dying, the fear. When we die, we confront the doubts we've always held. Have I been good enough? Is there something next? A void? Will I ever see those I love again? Even creatures with very simple minds experience the fear. When a rabbit is caught by a fox, a brigand killed by a caravan guard, the fears and doubts they feel in their final moments are left here, a permanent, invisible stain on our living world. They don't belong here, but to shuffle them across would only bring misery to those who have already found peace. "These fragments are everywhere," said Wade, tears welling in his eyes. "I can hear them even now. They're quiet, like a calm wind in a barley field. They're so quiet, but I can feel them, and I can wield them as a sword." And in doing so, he could feel a small measure of each death. That's what makes it so hard to kill, he thought. He knows better than most what it truly means. "I'm happy to teach you how to wield an actual sword," said Marsta, her usual levity coupled with warmth. "Literal swords don't tend to bite their masters." She untethered her water skin from her belt and pressed it into his trembling hands. She knelt on one knee beside him and set a hand on his shoulder. "Can you stand? We should push for Trellis. If what you say is true, and the creature can't lie to you in death, then these woods are not safe." "Trellis won't be safe," said Wordle. "It's a hamlet. We've returned to Caden and closed that gate behind us." "That's 8 days from here," said Rustenin, the blacksmith, his grizzled and deep voice booming even when quiet. "We'd never make it if more of these things are out there." "They wouldn't let us in anyway," said Barber. "They can't refuse citizens' entry," said Wordell. "Enough." Wrong voice. "Enough," said Melissa Noland. "Everyone calm down. Marcia's right. The safest course for us is Trellis. Let's see if we can rearrange some of the loads in the carts so some of us can sleep while the others take turns driving so we don't need to stop. We have some room to spare on our carts if you need." "If we push the mount backs too hard, they won't make it to Trellis," said Barber. "We should at least leave this site," said Marsta. "Everyone pack up," said Melissa. "Come on now. No one gets left behind. Check the harnesses on your mount backs. They may have popped a buckle due to that scare they had." The caravanners freed themselves from their trances and obeyed, smothered their fires, piled their camping gear themselves onto their carts. Marsta helped Wade return to his seat on the lead cart. Melissa sat beside him and took the reins, shaking them and clicking her mouth to spark the caravan into motion. Behind them slept Noland, splayed out upon several burlap bags. In spite of how violently the cart lurched with the road, he didn't stir of his own accord. Barbara rode up ahead, and Marcia dropped back to the rear. "You okay, Pastor?" Melissa asked. "Yes," said Wade after a moment. "I'd hoped that I wouldn't need to act, but I had no choice." "I'm glad you did. We all are. You saved us," said Melissa. "My father and I would have been dead for certain. We are in your debt." "You have no debt to me," said Wade. That was the truth, he thought. But it's also true that leaving it at that would be a dismissal of your message. If I'm going to be their neighbor, he thought, that won't do. Of course, he said. I'm happy to help. Melissa smiled at him, straining her eyes a bit to follow their tracker. I can't believe we got out of that unscathed. Unhurt in body, thought Wade. But some harm has been done. The disturbance I just caused is sure to have called out to her. She'll be on her way now. Chapter 5. Chapter 6 is in fine shape. We can do Chapter 6. And I guess 7 might be okay too. If y'all are having a good time. If not, I'm still going to read. That's the plain truth of it. I'm so glad you're with me. Thank you for being here, everybody. Last time I did this, I would read only one chapter and do other stuff after. I've been enjoying just kind of like moving through the story. It's nice. All right. Water. 7 minutes till pre-rolls. Oh, God. I spent a lot of time on that chapter. Like, a lot of time. I mean, so this is like 15 years of work. I've been in this chapter. I haven't actually touched anything in this chapter meaningfully in a few years, but I did spend basically 3 years, months on, months off, looking through it, figuring out how to word things, how I wanted things to be presented and appear and stuff. This is the best edited chapter I have. Still got typos in it. Writing. Okay. Chapter 6. I need an actual editor. That might help. Trellis was a smoldering ruin. That's not how the book should read, but I mean, I just looked aside because I forgot how I started this chapter. Trellis was a smoldering ruin. Marcia knew it would be. The air had been hot and syrupy with oily smoke for more than a mile outside of town. Pardon me. Here on the village threshold, the weight of its stench pressed down upon her with both of its leathery hands. It reeked of charred pitch and burned flesh. It made her eyes water and insides sting. Trellis had been small. There had been a small boarding house for travelers, a single tiny barn, and a handful of houses for the few families that once called it home. Blackened husks stood in their places now, still smoking with no sign of rain or wind to cleanse it. Marcia had suggested that she, Barber, and Wade scout the town prior to the caravan drawing near. The only one opposed to the idea had been Barber. He retched so hard then that he'd stumbled, steadying himself on Marcia's arm. Easy, said Marcia, pausing so he could right himself. The three of them stopped next to a burned-out house, a 10-span by 6-span footprint, big enough for a small family, one just starting out. Barber took a moment to wrap his scarf over his nose and mouth. Bloodthirsty monsters, he spat. I can't believe anything would want this. Nor I, said Marcia. The villagers are just ahead, said Wade. Survivors? Asked Barber, following his gaze. No, said Wade, his voice distant and hollow. Marcia clasped Wade's shoulder and stopped him when she saw it. There was a heap of bodies at the town center beside its well, ashen and broken. The Bargeists had killed every one of them, thought Marcia, and burned them. Why the fire? What fresh madness had taken hold of them all? Thanks, Theda's Anvil. I have 5 minutes. Theda's Anvil. Trail ends here, said Barber. Nonsense, said Marcia. We still live, and we will endure. Maybe so. But I was talking about those two runaways. Maybe they got through here before this happened. Barber retched and coughed again, winced against the churn in his stomach. Maybe we'll find him in Hollis. Wade said nothing. He pulled away from Marcia and approached the citizens. Several days dead, their pain was very concentrated. He kneeled beside their bodies and held one hand out to them, palm open. The bodies were no longer warm. Only the buildings still burned. Marcia led Barber beyond the well toward the cliff over the river. You think he's going to have a chat with them? Barbara asked Marcia. Barbara asked Marcia. Sorry, Barber. Barber, I went back and forth on Barber's name is Strelictus Barber, and he tells no one it's Strelictus until the end of the fucking story because he hates it. In the campaign, it's a meme. It comes up. That might be a spoiler for that. That might be the one spoiler for my D&D folks watching this. If you didn't know Barber's first name yet, Now you do. It's Strelictus, the poor bastard. He hates his name. But his last name's not Barbara. You think he's going to have a chat with them? Barbara asked Marsta once they were out of earshot from Wade. I believe he'll grant them peace, said Marsta. Barbara shifted from foot to foot, keeping his balance against the scales in his head, weighing words. He clamped his teeth between his lips and narrowed his eyes as they met Marsta's. He scares me, said Barbara after a moment. He's a scary guy. Each of us can be scary, said Marsta. Don't forget that he saved our lives. If not for him, the Bargeists would have slaughtered the unarmed, the defenders would have unraveled, and we'd have been killed. You could have killed all of them. No, she said. 13 Bargeists is 5 too many. I would have killed most of them before I fell, but not all. Could have fooled me, said Barbara. Do you ever miss? Of course. I have my limits. You only saw me matched against people, and they were untrained. Is he smitten? Or does he want to believe we don't need Wade? What about here? She asked. Can you tell how many there were? The group that attacked us was too small to have done this. I don't know. There were so many feet here. Barbara worked his mouth under his scarf, more from frustration than nausea this time. Maybe 30 of those Bargeists and as many humans. I can't say how many of them were townsfolk, though. Harker, what more would you ask of me? Marcia said to herself, squeezing her holy symbol until it hurt in spite of her calluses. Its impression on her thumb and forefinger lingered, a dull ache to match the one she'd been keeping in the background. Some of the skulls were too small to have been tested this way, she thought. She wept a moment, silently, saying her own prayer for the dead. Marsta and Barbara walked to the ledge overlooking the river, some 200 spans below. The Lane was a mile wide and the world in length, flowing softly and steadily southward. I misspelled traveled again. What's wrong with me? A well-traveled dirt road ran the full length of the river on its far side. The long road, the trade highway that Caden wanted to be a part of. Could almost spit on Hollis from here, said Barbara. Marcia drew her spyglass from its case on her belt and extended it. She took a deep breath to try and still her anxieties, which didn't work. Looking through the spyglass did, though. Hollis still lives, she breathed. The town shows no traces of battle. It was a town on 2 levels, one up on the road, one down on the river. The lower level had 3 docks, a mill, and a few dozen houses and buildings, not all of which were complete. The upper level was on the long road. Hollis was host to a dozen... Oh my gosh, it's my worst thing. Traveling. 2 L's ever. Hollis was host to a dozen traveling merchant carts, even now. The town was set against a sheer cliff face, a 400-span-high basalt wall. Its people were out and about, starting the day, perhaps unaware for now of what had befallen their sister town. Hollis was a meager but promising village. And poorly defended, thought Marsta. She saw only 2 people with spears, no gates, no walls. They'd be dead in an hour to such an onslaught. How could the Bargeist clans have united, she wondered. 100 splintered factions with overlapping claims upon territory and wildly divergent ideas about honor. They'd never seen more than a day of peace amongst themselves. But it's always been among themselves. She'd seen many of their kind on her slow road to Hollis through the northern mountains, even just over a month ago. Traded with them. Their quarrels have always been only with themselves. Or they were. What is this bargain their dead lieutenant spoke of? He can speak with the dead, she thought. She handed her spyglass to Barbara and shook her head to clear it. Here, she said. Look. It's not on fire, said Barbara. That's a nice change. It looks to be okay, said Marsta. 1 more day of travel, then. 2 more, at least. That road down the river is steep. It'll take us a day just to get the carts down across the bridge. And we shouldn't stop in Hollis, said Barbara. Short trip for us is a short trip for those wolf things and their friends. Not in the 100 generations would the Bargeist clan ally so closely with humans, she said, exasperated. It makes no sense. Something has happened. All the more reason to skip on Hollis and keep on walking. No, I won't leave Hollis to this fate. Look, the town lies where it does because the land to the north and south are too narrow. They'd prove a severe hindrance to any army from either approach. The town could be fortified with little trouble. Walls, palisade, pits, towers. They already have much wood and stone cut. We should Talk them into coming with us, said Barber. Take the whole show north. The Bargeists are north. South, then. Bah, said Martha, snatching her spyglass. I see courage in you, Tracker, and heart. You don't fool me. I know you two will stay to protect them. I will? She nodded. Harker has led us to this. Did I misspell led? I sure did. We are meant to be here for these people. Lead you here, maybe, said Barber, but that's your burden with your God. I'd like to keep my blood in my body for as long as I can. I don't think those dog things see eye to eye with me on that. You're only allowing yourself to think that way because you are no longer seeing the younglings or young Miss Noland. We'll continue this chat when we rejoin the caravan. Barber looked as though he had some biting words to share, but he swallowed them, scratched his head instead. What kind of a name is Barber, anyway? Said Martha. Huh? It's my family name, said Barber. And your given name isn't up for discussion. We'll come back to that later. Can't wait, said Barber, returning her spyglass. The wind picked up then, dressing their silence in a fetid heat, throbbing as it gently pushed them past towards Hollis. Once Wade had finished, they rejoined the caravan, and there it is again, I misspelled that. Led them along the edge of the town, doing their best to keep it out of sight. The road down to the river was a day's journey, steep and deathly quiet. All words were kept at bay by ash in the air and the taste it left in their mouths. The south bridge spanned the river, its brilliant white marble sullied but unharmed by the elements. Every other pace stood a carved face, each with different eyes and noses, but none with mouths. It's said that the bridge is older than Caden, older than Caragard, but its ancient marvel was lost on them all. Its grandeur and mystery were both eclipsed by the relief they all felt stepping onto the bridge. All save one. Wade kept watching behind them, holding the receding riverbank in his sight as long as he could. Okay, I'm going to do one more ad thing, and then we'll do the last chapter. I run ads to disable pre-rolls, so when folks come in, they aren't interrupted by stupid pre-rolls, because pre-rolls are stupid, and I hates them. Nothing interesting happens during the ad break. So, during this break, take a moment, text someone you think's awesome, your friend, family, loved one of any kind, and just for no other reason, tell them they're cool. And also fill your water glasses. Water is important. We like that here. I'll be back in a minute and 30 seconds. Right, Twitch? It's so slow. Nothing happens during the ad break. Don't panic. One of my favorite clips, actually. I really love this clip. Beardless, you're a troll. I am what I am. I said what I said, and I stand behind it 1,000%. That is Dr. Seuss, right? Horton hatches the egg or whatever. An ad within an ad. Don't actually do buy Grob coins. You can do that. Go follow the Grob and get yourself some of that. All right, Chapter 7 is still in development. It's like the chapter it's actually not the chapter I'm the least happy with. The chapter I'm the least happy with is 8. 8 is a dumpster fire. I might throw it away and just skip. ahead in the story because I don't know how to make 8 work yet. And I don't necessarily need it. I don't know. We'll get to that. Okay, so chapter 7. Chapter 7. Is this the wrong font? What the fuck font is that? Does that look weird? Calibri size 12. It's the same font, but does it zoom in more somehow? How'd that happen? I don't know. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same font. I'm just having a moment. Okay. Leave me alone, the young man shouted. Stay away. He was hiding under the bed in his cell, his face turned away and covered with his hands. Nolan expected to reintroduce himself to everyone prior to announcing his governorship. Instead, he found that, upon arrival in Hollis, everyone had already guessed he was in charge. He had the biggest house, after all, and they were eager for him to get things organized, especially with the rumors of what happened to Trellis with the smoke and all. I use Commodore 64 font. At least that wasn't common knowledge yet, he mused. There were questions about it, though. Nolan didn't see it firsthand, so he was able to say just that for now. So, pleasantries were all very brief, and here Nolan was, with the pastor and the constable of his new town, to meet with a young man who was possessed by demons, or spirits, depending on whom you asked. This is how he's been spending his time in here, sir, said Prillit to Nolan. Prillit was grizzled and short-tempered Cade, with a face and hands to match. His features seemed to have been carved from a sapling with a hatchet, sharp and long. Did he hurt anybody? Nolan asked. No, sir. But he's scaring everybody something fierce. Keeps raving about voices in his head and stuff he's seeing that no one else sees. He's got a demon in him or something, he added, with a careful and hopeful look at Wade. What's his name? Asked Wade. Tag, said Prillit. Tag or Tur? Pastor, what do you think? Nolan asked. I think I should talk to him, said Wade. Alone. I don't want to talk to anybody, Tag said, starting as a plea and ending as a yelp. That's enough, boy, barked Prillit, rattling the bars with his keys. Please allow me to handle this, Constable, said Wade. Governor. Right, let's leave the pastor. Actually, aside, I'm going to change this. Nolan's a baron. That works better for the structure I have politically here. But I used governor in the past few chapters just because I wasn't too bent on being precise about it, but now I am. So, if you're wondering about that, probably you weren't. I was wondering about that. We'll just go with this. It doesn't really matter. Thanks for turning to my TED Talk. Right, let's leave the pastor to it then, said Nolan. Come, Prillit, I need you to accompany me as I catch up on goings-on. Suits me just fine, said Prillit. He shrugged, and the two of them left Wade and the caged young man. The cell was small, 2 bunk beds, but only enough room for one inmate to move about at a time. It was clean, though, and as Tag was the only inmate in the jail, it was quiet, between Tag's outbursts. Comic Sans is really fantastic font. It's really great. I don't know why I get so much hate. I think because it's popular and people like to buck the thing that's popular. I'm not really sure, but it's a really, really great font. It's fantastic. Wade sat down and leaned against the cage, opposite of Tag's. Go away, said Tag. Please go away. Wade listened. Wade heard Tag shuffle and breathe. He noticed that the stone floor, granite cut from the mountain, was rough and cold, drawing heat away from his buttocks. He noticed his own breathing, the rising and falling of his chest. He noticed the single cast iron bar between his shoulder blades, and the contact between his clothing and his skin. The air passing through his nostrils, separate but within but apart. There. Human fragments. There had been some tragedy near here, Wade thought. Some died of sickness, some to violence, very few to age. All of them had passed within months or even weeks of each other. The fragments had all been here long before Hollis. But they remained. They always do without help. Most were death pains, which of course Wade wouldn't shepherd across the divide. Some of the voices were clearer, though. Stronger. It will pass, said Wade, Shut up, said Tag. It will pass, Wade said again. Shut up! It will pass. I will see Molly again. There was a thud and a clatter as Tag slammed his head into the bunk. Wade hadn't been talking to Tag. He'd been repeating one of the fragments. Tag dragged himself over to the bars with one hand, clutching his head with the other. He was a young man, early 20s at most. Dark hair was short, his face only a week unshaven, and his eyes were red and puffy. You hear it? Said Tag. The vindication in his voice was only a touch clearer than the relief. Yes, said Wade. Then you know. I'm haunted, said Tag. No, said Wade. They're not here for you, but they are here, and they don't wish or need to be. Tag continued to stare at Wade for a long moment, his mouth agape. You're a listener? You need to breathe, Tag. Breathe. Tag remained frozen a moment more, finally shutting his eyes and drawing a long and shaky breath. He sat back against the side of the cell, his eyes taking in everything they could of the pastor. You're really a listener? Asked Tag. Wade nodded. I am, he said. Am I a listener? He asked. You can't control it, but you have her gift, said Wade. Doesn't feel like much of a gift. At times. It certainly doesn't. Who's Molly? I don't know, said Wade. Someone very long dead, I would guess. Sibling, lover, pet, whoever it was someone of importance to the fragment that keeps saying it. Is that why they're here? Find Molly? It's hard to say. They've been dead a long time. Wade paused, closing his eyes a moment. 100 years or more? Something happened near here which killed most or all of them. How do you know that? They haven't said anything about that. What you're hearing is only the surface, and will remain that way as long as you fight it. I don't want to keep hearing it. Fighting it won't shut them out. Well, what do I do then? The farmhouse again. Thoughts. Unbidden. As they so often are. You'll need to learn a new way to think, said Wade. Her gift is a closer connection to all life, bound or unbound. The thoughts of the dead mingle with our own. What good is that to anybody, said Tag. Their thoughts in my head will drive me mad. Our power to hear them is what lets us help them. What good is that to me? You have her gift, so you already have her favor. He didn't never see Molly again, did he? He intuited the gender without guidance, thought Wade. That's positive. He may have, upon crossing over. We're only hearing a fragment, a piece of the man's soul. It has more to it than just the pain of dying, so it should be pushed over. We'll do that together. I'll show you how. I don't want anything to do with that, said Tag. I just want it to stop. You don't need to join the order, said Wade. But if you want to be able to sleep at night, you do need to learn how to do this. Nobody believed me, said Tag, his eyes falling to the ground. At first I tried to ignore it, but it just got louder and louder. It's unending. They just keep coming, and they're so sad. It kills me to hear it. They keep coming. Yeah, you can make them stop? Some of them, yes. We can help. We will set them free. You're going to teach me? I'm going to try, yes. Tag ran his hands over his stubble, clamped his eyes shut, rocking back and forth against the wall. He shook his head vigorously as if trying to dry himself after a swim, then looked back to Wade. How can I do anything when the noise never... It stopped! He suddenly started. It's quiet! What did you do? If you wander too far away from me, they'll return, said Wade. I can keep them quiet for you. For a time. You can't just take her gift away from me? Not without delivering you to her. Ty sighed and massaged his temples. It's quiet, Tag said, breathing calmly for the first time in weeks. Thank the gods it's quiet. Okay, preacher. What do I do? Oh, I mean, I'm happy to hear your theory about Wade if you like. So that's like part of this chapter. It still needs some work. I kind of a lot of work. some of the language around how the sensations are working, like the experience tag's having, isn't quite how I see it. It's not, and it also doesn't like match with the way things have to proceed later in the story, which I understand now. It's the kind of thing that I should probably return to much, much later, but it's such a mess. I think I have to fix it now. I don't know. Maybe I'll leave it. And then after that, this is kind of chapter 8, but it's part of it. So they're both so short, the chunks, that I left them here. And it just introduces another character who's pretty important to the story, and I'm not really sure how to introduce him given the current cadence of the story. In the D&D campaign, it's easy because there's a bunch of quests they have to do in the town, right? And so the party stays in the town, and then they meet this character because remember, they fortify the town, right? They spend a lot of time that players don't want me to burn the town down. They saw a trellis, and so they're like, fuck. And so they immediately start like walling and palisading the south and training the town guards and stuff. And I have yet to have a party that doesn't do something to quickly fortify and militarize the southern end of Hollis. So, but this party does not do that. They set the group up to do it. Melissa and Nolan will take control of that because Melissa is like a really good leader. You can probably tell that Melissa is a very gifted commander and Nolan is a very gifted diplomat. That's their gifts, right? So the party is going to do something else. So, and that, dear friends, is the story as it exists in Reading. I mean, I can tell you the whole story in like an outline view because I've run parts of the campaign later and I also know how the story has to play out. But like there's a lot of dialogue I still got to write. A lot. I'm barely scratching the surface on it. So, oop. Is it perfect timing? Perfect timing would happen. Perfect timing. So, thank you for hanging out with me. And doing the read time. Oh, perfect timing because it's basically 11 o'clock. It is. That's pretty good. How about them apples, everybody? I guess we'll do the thing. We'll do the thing. What did we learn tonight? Well, we learned all about the world I've created and spent a long time. 15 years is not an exaggeration. It's literally how long I've been doing it, maybe longer, actually. I started the campaign a long time ago using a specific dungeon with not much idea in the little town that I wanted them to protect. And then I just let it grow from there. And I had to develop all sorts of stuff. I made those maps. I made the pictures. I had to every character in the town is like a person. I know who they are, what they want, what they're afraid of, and what they need. Every single background character is a known quantity to me because I have it all documented for the campaign. So it doesn't matter what random peasant my folks talk to, the peasant probably has a story. And this is the book where some of that stuff's going to come out, and I'm excited about that. I've put so much of my life into this D&D campaign, so to breathe it into a book is just really sweet. So thank you. Thank you for hanging out with me. It was my pleasure. I don't just mind Beerless. It's also, I wanted to do it to help me because I have a writer's block happening for months now and I haven't been able to get back into it, both because time is hard and sometimes just convincing myself that it's any good is really difficult, but sharing it with folks who are like, hey, we like that. It's just the encouragement I need. I like that all. Also, we got a couple of new follows sent to folks who actually write on Twitch, which is pretty exciting. I think I'm going to check their streams and presences out and maybe writing on Twitch is a thing I could do. I'll give it some thought. I've thought about it in the past. It didn't seem like a thing that would work for the way we do things here. But we get to change things, and I have multiple nights. I'm a variety streamer. If one night a week was writing, and we still had Elden Ring, we still had collab times, what are we losing? We're not losing it. We're not losing nothing. I'm thinking about it. It's not like I am short on things to do, because we are very lucky in our friends. So many folks to hang out with and spend time with. For instance, my friend who I've known longer than Hollis has existed, who I've been talking about this evening, she's also streaming. She basically went live just after I did. Fragi1E. If you don't know Fragi, you're in for a treat. She's an absolute delight. She's funny. She's fun. She's very engaging. You're going to have a great time in there. She's a musician. She does art stuff. She's a healthcare provider. She's very eclectic. You're going to love it. All right. I'm going to Zoom, and we're going to go, and I'm going to hang out with you all. It's going to be dope. You're dope. I'm back tomorrow, probably a little bit early because it's normal Sunday times, and so I'll play some Elden Ring, and then Quinn and I are doing something. Probably not Nancy. I'm not quite ready. I need spoons and forks for Nancy, and it's school ramp up. Soccer games at 8 a.m. are really, really beautiful. Kindergarten soccer is so cool. But I am really tired. So I don't know if we can do it. I'm zooming out. You're amazing. I'll see you tomorrow. Let's go see Fraggy. Good night, everybody.